617
Oh,
where.
nice.
Yeah,
Actually, I
good
have a
evening,
quick
Jeff.
question.
No problem. I'm just going to rename you on the screen, Ian.
Okay, I don't have the screen, so I'll find out what you're calling me from someone else afterwards.
I went with
Actually,
Calling you
the
617?
Ian Golding.
Actually, I have a question for you,
Yes.
or maybe Jeff knows. Jeff, the land banks before us tonight, and I am a direct abutter out in Pulpus. Is there any issue with that?
With you as a direct abutter?
Yeah,
For which one?
land bank.
I would probably, for the general one,
I feel pretty strongly about this too, so I like to be able to put my 2 cents in.
I think if you disclose that you're in a butter, but you're reviewing the practices as they apply to all of the land bank policies, I think you would be okay.
It's in trust too, so it's not really, my name doesn't appear on the deed right now.
Yeah, I think that would be possible.
Okay, I'll do it. Thank
I
you.
think we may be continuing that one anyways, but we'll have to see.
All right.
Okie
So
dokie.
I think it's 5, so we should be ready to go now. So I'll begin by reading our remote script. So as a preliminary matter, this is Ashley Erisman, Chair of the Nantucket Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal,
Present.
Seth Engelborg,
Here.
Ashley Erisman is here, Ian Golding,
Here,
Dave LaFleur,
Present.
Maureen Phillips.
Present.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jeff Carlson,
Good afternoon.
Joanne Dodd,
Hi.
and then anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. So we have Brian Madden,
Here.
Julie Jordan. Oh, you're muted.
Here.
Awesome. David Haynes,
Here.
Don Bracken,
Here.
Art Gasparo,
Here.
Sarah Alger,
Here.
Paul Santos,
Here.
Mark Ritz.
Here.
I think I got everybody. Good evening. This open meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. This order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Nantucket Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom app, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. Staff will activate the chat feature on YouTube. Members of the public who have comments or questions can use this feature to communicate with the public body. Instructions are on the town's website. The chair and/or staff will do their best to address questions and comments. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So with that, we will go to the first item on the agenda, which is public comment.
So, Madam Chair, just two public comments to this point, both from Burton Balkand, or Balkand, I always say his name different ways for whatever reason. He asked for an update on 289 Hummick Pond Road. And then we also asked a question if we review the Pond Coalition Phragmites removal. I answered the second one to him online and just said we review the monitoring reports and do site inspections. And I'll just add to that that all of the projects that have come in to date are also something that we've heard through the notice of intent process, and any future projects would probably have to fall within that same process as long as they're within areas of jurisdiction. As for 289 Hummick Pond Road, we've continued to work with the applicant there to get the site put back together. We've had an issue with stability of the access and getting the machinery needed to remove the concrete from that area to get shored up, and been dealing with that potentially as an emergency, but haven't been able to finalize that as an emergency. We've talked to the representatives multiple times about getting that cleanup underway. I know they cleaned up some of the stuff along the beach, some of the insulation and things that were free. I know our inspections when we did the opening of Hummick Pond last Friday, we weren't able to find any debris in the area of the opening that was significant. We're still endeavoring to get that cleanup underway in those changing conditions. One of the other things that we had to do, just to speak to the pond opening a bit, is access from the west side, from the head of the plains, kind of Clark's Cove side this year, is instead of the Hummick Pond Road, just because we weren't able to get the machinery down the beach as we normally do safely and during the tidal cycles necessary to get out there. There's an area that's directly west of the property that during about 3/4 of the entire tidal cycle is being actively eroded away from that bank, which has made access to that area from the other side problematic as well. So some of the things that have been coming out of the bank have been cut. Admittedly, cleanup has been a little slower than I think all of us had hoped. But I think everyone's still understanding that all of the pieces that are there do need to be removed and that site made whole again as soon as possible. But I'll continue. We monitor that site. We're probably out there 2 to 3 times a week at a minimum, just to kind of check on any progress and what's happening. So it is a site that we're out at a lot. So hopefully we'll start to see more progress there, and hopefully we'll be able to find a way to help get access to that site that's safer and more reliable.
Thank you, Jeff. So if there are no more public comments, the following items are continued. Under notices of intent, we have Eli Zabar at 47 Squam Road, continued until October 29th. We have Marsha Kleinberg at 18 Quidnet Road, continued until October 29th. Nantucket Island Land Bank, all land bank properties, continued until October 29th. We have 46 Shimo Pond Road Nominee Trust at 46 Shimo Pond Road, continued until October 29th. And then Peter E. Hale and Carolyn B. Lamb at 24 Pilgrim Road, also continued until October 29th.
Madam Chair, we also, right before the meeting, we had a continuance request for Mary Jo Buckland at 113 Hummick Pond Road, also to October 29th.
Okay, so Mary Jo Buckland at 113 Hummick Pond is continued until October 29th as well. And then moving down in the agenda, in the public hearing, the amendment of the Town of Nantucket Conservation Commission Wetland Protection Regulations is continued until October 29th. And discussion of SBPF 77 through 122 Baxter Road and 65 through 67 Baxter Road is also continued until October 29th. So with that, we will begin the public hearing under notices of intent with Nantucket Point of View LLC at 9 Lincoln Avenue. And this is represented by Brian Madden, Don Bracken, and Sarah Alger.
Thank you very much. We're going to request a continuance to October 29th as well. Sorry for the late notice.
Okay. So this one will continue until October 29th as well. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
So that moves us on to Shakamo 1 LLC at 36 Shakamo Road, represented by Brian Madden and Don Bracken.
Thank you very much. For the record, Brian Madden. At the last meeting, we continued. We didn't have the natural heritage letter, which we do have now for no adverse impact, no take. And we've shown the proposed construction access route that avoids any intrusion into the 25-foot buffer zone that's naturally vegetated. And on the east side of the house, abutting that retaining wall, again, that's all through previously landscape conditions, primarily planted arrowwood shrubs that are going to be replaced in kind post access. And then it's just going to meet up with the existing lawn area and footpath out to the work areas. And with that, no waivers being requested, and I'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions from commissioners? Looks like not. Are there any questions from the public?
We have not received any comment, but we do have all of the required information to close.
All right. Brian, would you like to close?
Please.
Is there a motion to close?
Motion to close?
Dave, Maureen, do you want the second?
Yes, please.
Maureen gets a second, so by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. And that moves us on to Tina Eager McGoldrick Trust at 33 Quidnet Road, represented by David Haynes.
Good evening. This notice of intent was opened, I believe, 4 weeks ago. We discussed it. We continued because we had comments from Natural Heritage that we had to address in that they wanted a revised plan, including basically the revised layout of the driveway. Also, they had questions about grading and requesting fencing to be put up. So we've revised the plan, revised the layout to avoid sensitive plants. And we've put up a split rail fence along the edge of the driveway. And in some areas, we're proposing to put a retaining wall on the a low retaining wall on the downhill side of the driveway to limit grading and prevent intrusion towards sensitive plants. All work will remain outside of the any existing vegetation within 25 is remaining. There's one small area where the driveway just barely hooks into the 50, and other than that, it's outside of the 50 all the way. All structures are outside of 50. There's no need for any dewatering. And so there are no waivers requested from the commission. And with that I would send it back to the commission.
Thank you, David. All right, are there any questions from commissioners? Dave?
Curious what type of retaining wall is going to be built alongside the east side of that drive?
It hasn't been designed yet, but what I was envisioning is basically some sort of a wooden sheet piling. It's only going to be a couple of feet high, and so just without a footing. It's got to be designed. It hasn't been designed yet.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Maureen?
David, I was wondering on the existing asphalt driveway, which I know is not at issue here, but where you see that coming down and obviously it must be old since it comes quite near. It looks like within the 25 of whatever the wetland is that's denominated there. Are they going to do anything with the old driveway? Do you know? I'm just curious because obviously it's asphalt and would be nice if it weren't there.
Well, we discussed that, and I first envisioned that driveway would be removed. However, because of the sensitive plants that are out there, our driveway is basically only 8 feet wide. And we would like to keep that, we want to keep that second driveway for emergency vehicles and gas trucks.
Okay.
So that's why we would like to, I understand the commission's concern about that. I actually got this driveway permitted about 25 years ago. When there wasn't a 25 and a 50-foot set. But I understand, I don't remember having asphalt in it, but that I'm sure was all taken care of.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the information.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any questions from the public? Do we have everything we need to close this one?
Yes, you do.
David, would you like to close?
Very much, please.
Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Mark, seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal. Oh, you're muted.
All right, sorry.
That's all right. Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, David.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And that moves us on to 64 Pacomo Road, not Realty Trust at 64 Pacomo Road, also represented by David Haynes. Oh. David, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, I lost you guys somewhere. There you are. Excuse me. What is proposed at 64 Pacomo Road is the construction of a swimming pool and a porch, and there is an associated pool house with it that's just outside or right at the buffer zone. This is in the buffer zone there is a coastal bank by policy, and there's also an isolated vegetated wetland at the bottom of the slope. All structures will be outside of 50. Basically, the existing shrub line will be maintained, and except for some areas inside of 50, outside of 50. The pool will have a retaining wall around it on the lower side to limit any kind of grading. It'll be a canister filter that will require no discharge of any water into the buffer zone. And there's a sediment and erosion controls are shown as a silt fence. There's going to be extra on site. All soils will be loamed, disturbed areas will be loamed and seeded or landscaped as appropriate. And basically that's my presentation.
Thank you, David. Any questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any questions from the public?
I asked a little bit late, but we haven't had any at this point.
Okay. Jeff, do we have everything we need to close this one?
Yes, you do.
Okay. All right, David, would you like to close?
Please.
All right, is there a motion to close?
Motion to close.
All right, motion made by Maureen. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Hi.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. That moves us on to Abramson at 80 Millbrook Road, represented by Mark Ritz.
Good afternoon, Mark Ritz from Site Design, representing the applicant at 80 Millbrook. During the last hearing for this project, the commissioners raised concerns about trees on the property within jurisdictional areas, and requested seeing a site plan that had a current aerial photo backing it, which we have provided, showing the extent of trees within the limit of work and jurisdiction on the lower left-hand portion there. There was also a request to provide a detail of the retaining walls for, excuse me, for the pool, and that's actually a double retaining wall, vanishing edge pool, and then a retaining wall below it. That detail has been provided. And the applicant has also, we went out and we flagged the trees that were in the work area that would be removed, the pitch pines. And we counted approximately 21 trees. There was a little debate because one or two of them were looking pretty dead. They were 3 to 4 inches and they didn't look to be alive. But we estimate approximately 20 trees will be removed, varying in caliper width from about 4 inches to 10 to 12 inches on some of the larger ones. The applicant has proposed to replant 30 to 40 pitch pines along the northern portion of the property, which has been shown on this aerial plan a little further up the page. If somebody could please scroll us. It's the area outlined in red. We chose that particular area because there are 2 stands of pitch pines, one to the east and one to the west of it, and we thought that we would plant in that relatively sparsely vegetated, it's mostly grass there with a few existing trees, that we would plant 30 to 40, 6 to 8 foot nursery stock pitch pines there to provide mitigation for the lost trees and to provide, a greater contiguous pitch pine habitat. And that's basically all the additional information I have, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions from commissioners? Mark?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm having a hard time reading the plot plan. I've got it in front of me, pretty well blown up on my computer, and I can't quite see how the pool will be sited in terms of the grade. There's a substantial grade there. And I want to be reassured that you're not going to be disturbing inside the 50-foot zone there with the corner of the pool being on the edge and just wonder how that will be constructed when the time of the building, and what will the ultimate elevation be of the pool?
Well, the pool is the elevation of the pool will be at 20, and if you look up the top of the page just to the left of the legend, there's a cross section showing the it's going to be a double retaining wall. There will be the edge of the pool itself will function as an approximately 4-foot high wall, vanishing edge pool. Then there will be a narrow area approximately 4 feet wide to capture any splash. And then there will be a second lower 4-foot retaining wall that is on the plan, it's shown as the double line that comes up just to the 50-foot buffer.
Are you confident you can do all that and not disturb our 25 to 50-foot zone?
Well, we are proposing grading in the 25 to 50-foot buffer zone there. We're just not proposing any structure there.
Gotcha. And what'll the surface of the path be like?
That portion of the path will be grass. We are proposing, if you look just to the north of the pool, we have proposed contours 12, 14, 16, and 18. We have a little bit of a pretty steep grade change there. We're proposing just interspersed pavers, stone pavers there, just to have a little bit of a step effect, not building a full staircase or anything, but just putting down a couple of isolated stone pavers. Then the portion of the path that goes to the west of the pool and all the way down to the dark gray shaded portion, that will just be a grass path. And then the dark gray shaded portion, which goes from the 25-foot buffer and into the wetland, that's an existing path already, that will be the elevated walkway to provide, adequate room for plants to grow underneath it. But that's an existing path. We're not proposing a new path.
Thank you.
Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd just like to say I appreciate the use of the drone ortho mosaic. I'm a fellow drone pilot as well, and it's good to see high resolution imagery rather than satellite. So props to you for that. The one thing I was wondering if we could get before the trees are cut, I was wondering if we could get a basal area calculation of the trees to be removed. And then when the nursery stock trees are put in, I know that they're going to vary in DBH and going to vary in height a little bit, and the exact number isn't exactly defined. So if we could get a basal area of the trees that are planted for the restoration, and then just keeping track of that in the annual monitoring so we can see how the restoration is progressing. We haven't, at least in my tenure on the commission, done a whole lot of tree-based restoration, and it's just good to have that those statistics available to track eventually when we're getting mature canopy cover at some point farther down the line. We'll know where we started.
Thank you, Seth. Mark, do you think that's something you could look into?
I mean, that's something we could certainly provide. We're hoping to get this kind of moving along, and we would be happy to comply with that kind of condition. We for the number of trees we propose to replant, we threw a range in there basically to see offering a somewhere between a 1.5 to 2x mitigation. We are happy to do that, or to throw in a few more trees. We chose a significantly larger area than the area we're altering to give us room to do more robust, replanting off the bat, if that would make the commission happier with the proposed project. But we can certainly do basal area calculations if that's required. But just, we would like to get this moving along for work to start sometime late this season.
Thank you. Seth?
Yeah, if I may respond, I understand it takes some work, but really all you need is just a DVH of each of the trees, and then you can use a table to get the basal area from that. And I think personally, I would just like to see, obviously the planted trees are gonna potentially be lower right now because they're saplings, but we understand that they're going to become mature at some point down the line, but just having the statistics in place of what's cut and what's put in my opinion, helps us set benchmarks for future projects in this area as well.
Thank you, Seth. Mark?
Is that something that perhaps could be added as a condition prior to the start of work, or is that something that the commission would like us to bring back to them? Because our preference would be to have that, if the commission is okay with it, to have it as a condition prior to the start of work, that we provide a report with the basal area calculations, and then as part of the ongoing monitoring of mitigation, provide the data for the replanted area.
Seth?
I don't want to speak for everybody, but that's fine with me as proposed. I don't think we need to hold up the whole process based on that, but it would be good to get that before the work starts. You could just go to the staff, I think.
Thank you, Seth.
We'd be very happy with that.
Mark, I know I still have concerns about this one. I see the trees within the buffer zone as having a higher habitat value than newly planted trees outside of the buffer zone. That proximity to the wetland ups the habitat value, because any organisms trying to use those trees are closer to their water source. And I also worry when I look at the plan, I don't think, like, the 22 trees you're talking about are the only ones within our buffer zone. But when I look at the whole east side of that property, I'm worried that all those pitch pines are gonna be cut down for the construction. Like, I'm wondering how that construction access is gonna work, and that we're potentially losing way more trees in that area than we realize as commissioners. Do you have any idea what the work access is gonna be?
Well, the work access, there is an existing, roughly vehicle-wide lawn strip on that side. And there's also the existing pool to the north of the house is going away. So there is the potential for access from that side as well. Because that pool area, the patio and pool area to the north of the house will be taken out. We're not going to have two pools on the property. So there will be access available from that area. In terms of what if any work they're proposing in other areas, in non-jurisdictional areas, I've really just been given the plan in front of me for the pool and the secondary dwellings. So we're really, focusing, my understanding is just of that portion of the project. So I don't know. But we will be able to access from the north and across the lawn to get to that area.
All right, thank you for that explanation. I think I'm just worried that any pitch pine that are outside of our jurisdiction aren't protected pitch pine. Even the replanting area, someone can come through and get rid of that. And I understand that natural heritage looked at this and maybe didn't recognize some of the habitat value, but I also think that's why they have local conservation commissions, because we're the ground truthers. We're the ones who actually are local, see the site, and have, I think, a better perspective in some ways of the habitat value in these areas. So I still am very concerned with this project, and I think I'd still like you guys to look at an alternative location on the property for the pool and the second dwelling.
Madam Chair,
Well,
if I may.
Yes, Ian?
Yes. So I agree with you and completely. And, you know, we've not only what Mark discussed before at the previous meeting, but at this meeting with Commissioner Beal's questions, I think it's clearly going to be disruptive in many ways between 25 and the 50 and your concerns about the pines. And I would say that a reasonable alternative is to site it where the tennis court is now, which would remove most of these issues and still would be a perfectly, it should be perfectly acceptable to the new owners, because they will have views of the pond from there. So I'm opposed to this project as it is proposed at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. And Mark, it looks like, or Mark Ritz, you can respond to that, and then Mark Beal had a comment.
Well, a couple of things. First, I'd like to address some of your comments, Ms. Harrisman. The replanting area, in terms of somebody coming along and cutting it down, if we commit to replanting in that area and we demarcate it, we will be required under the order of conditions, while it's not strictly speaking within a wetland jurisdictional area, we will be required to plant there, monitor, maintain those plants, and we won't be able to file for a COC on the project unless we have carried that out. And as you are well aware, a COC can carry ongoing conditions for monitoring and maintaining that area. So I don't believe that simply because it's outside of the 100-foot buffer jurisdiction that would necessarily, you know, limit the ability of maintaining and enforcing maintenance of that area. In terms of siting the pool in another location, based on what I've spoken with the client and the architect on this, it wouldn't go where the tennis court is. It would go to the southeast of the driveway, if it goes anywhere. Which, if you're looking at the aerial, is a considerably larger stand of pines than we're talking about the 20 or so trees within the 100-foot buffer. That's just, you know, what their design preferences are. That's outside of heritage habitat. It's outside of any jurisdictional areas. I'm a little bit, honestly, I'm a little bit perplexed by the resistance to this project. Overall, it is a pool and a retaining wall outside of the 50-foot buffer. It's the kind of project with some grading between the 25 and 50, maintaining greater than 50% native vegetation. This is the type of project that is routinely permitted in many places on the island. We understand the concerns about the unusual quantity of pitch pines. We have attempted to provide a pretty robust mitigation for that concern. We've offered up to 2 to 1. We can go a higher number of trees if that would make the commission happy. But we feel that this is the type of project that is, you know, that is routinely permitted outside the 50-foot buffer. Heritage reviewed it. They did not have any concerns with the habitat or with the proposed impacts to the habitat. So honestly, we're a little bit surprised by the resistance we're getting on this one.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think, you know, when we looked at the habitat there, it wasn't maybe clearly represented in your first application. And I think in viewing it, you know, many of us are concerned in a large property that we could maybe make choices that are better for the resource areas by moving further away. Mark, I think you had a question, or you don't anymore. So Seth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I share some of the sentiments that yourself and Ian have expressed, but Jeff Carlson is welcome to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure in our regulations and our local bylaw, what is considered rare species is pretty specific to either encompass things that only have been given that status by natural heritage or by mass wildlife, or have been specifically called out in our bylaw as being rare. So I totally agree from an ecological perspective that pitch pine is a super important habitat for specifically northern long-eared bat, and which is an endangered species, and a variety of other wildlife. I just don't know regulatorily if we have the kind of language, the teeth in that language to enforce on that alone. So I would love for us to be able to, but I don't know if we indeed are.
Yep. Thank you, Seth. I agree with you there, that I think that the language is tough, but I also, and I know Jeff can maybe speak to this, natural heritage tends to be understaffed and not really reviewing these projects as thoroughly as they could. And I know that's a bigger issue. And maybe it happens with our regulation rewrite, but I think, we rely on their opinion, but they're not necessarily putting in the effort to give us cohesive opinions every time. So I think it's a bigger issue.
Yeah, and if I may, I think in the regulatory update, it definitely needs to be looked at. And as a scientist, from an ecological perspective, I think this is a potential large cause of concern. I just don't know from a regulatory permitting perspective if we have the language to do anything about it in this case. That's just being honest. I wish it was not, but that's how I view the regulation in that case personally.
Thank you, Seth. Any other thoughts, Maureen?
Yes, when we looked at this last time, I was concerned about just about everything that Commissioner Beal mentioned a few minutes ago, and especially about how this pool was going to be kind of maneuvered into there, and without causing too much disturbance to the rest of the property, and of course the resource area. And as I'm sure that that Mr. Ritz can understand, we tend to look at, we're looking at that whole property, and we're well aware of our jurisdictional limitations. And they can be very frustrating. And I agree with what Seth said about that as well. But I am, at the end of the day, the questions that I had, I think, have been answered appropriately. My biggest concern is the construction, the time of construction, because the pool is perched right there on the edge of the resource area, right on the 50-foot. So I'm not sure if we can put in a more particular condition about whether it's monitored or what have you during construction, so that this does not impact the resource area between the pool and the pond. Because that's really from a jurisdictional point of view, that's my biggest concern. And not being a plant person, I can't speak to the issues of the pitch pine. Although when I did walk around there, it's clearly a very important part of the habitat, but I think I do see that there is an effort to recognize that. And so while I'd rather, I agree with Seth, I'd rather that we had more, if you will, more say in what happens closer to our resource areas and to have more control over that and its potential impact on the resource area itself. I think I am, reluctantly would go along with this. It's not that I think this is the best thing for this property, but I think that is the best we could do given our regulatory limitations. And so, Jeff, we could do some kind of condition about maintenance of the resource area during construction. I mean, it's probably goes without saying, but can we be more specific about that here? Because it is so, it's really teetering on the edge there.
Jeff, do you have a response?
Sure. Yeah. No, you always have the ability to put conditions on a project that you feel necessary to protect the interests and the resource area and their buffer zones, as long as they're kind of within the performance standards. So if you feel that there's a timing or construction sequencing or anything that's necessary to protect the resource area and the buffer zone, you can certainly impose conditions of that nature.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeff. Mark?
Yes.
Two suggestions on this plan that I might make to the developer, the owner. One is maybe to move the pool to the north and east and get it out of that critical area that's so close to the 50-foot line, which I am still struggling with. And the other is that the construction vehicles be required to only access the property north of the abandoned pool, right between the garage and the house. That'll be the only access road for any construction vehicles and supplies.
Thank you, Mark. Mark Ritz, do you oppose that, or is that something you think that could be done?
Well, I think that, well, for starters, just to give you a little bit of an idea of construction sequencing here, we're showing the line of the retaining wall right up against the 50. Realistically, on this plan scale, if I am recalling correctly, 1 inch equals 30 feet. So realistically, the retaining wall will be, a foot or two off of that 50-foot buffer. It's not going to be right on top of it. The way that the construction sequencing would work is that lower retaining wall, which is only a 4-foot retaining wall, with a footing, and by the way, the footing would not be inside the 50. So, taking into account that footing would be outside of the 50, so the wall itself would be, if I'm looking at the plan here, the wall itself would be a minimum of 1 to 2 feet outside of that 50. That lower retaining wall would be built first, and it would function as a barrier to any other, further structural work. As I said, we have shown and we are proposing some grading between the 25 and 50, but we are maintaining more than 50% as existing native. Once that lower retaining wall is in place, all subsequent work for the pool itself will be 4 feet inbound of that. So it will be a minimum of about 6 or so, 6+ feet landward of that 50-foot buffer, and would be now behind a retaining, that lower retaining wall. So we feel that with proper survey, proper staking, and oversight of the work, that work would be outside of the 50-foot. No structure will be inside of the 50-foot. Again, we'll have to provide an as-built plan, and if we've crossed into the 50-foot, we know what the commission will require us to do. So we're not interested in having to rebuild a wall or a pool. We're going to be very careful to make sure that it's outside of the 50. There will be grading inside of the 50, but that's something that is typically permitted. In terms of construction access, we can call for construction access from the north, where the old pool is. We could live with that. you know, although it's not really a jurisdictional area, but we could live with that if that's what the commission would require of us.
Thank you. I think it's more of a concern for all those pitch pine potentially getting cut down if you were to do a shorter construction access. Jeff, and then Dave.
Sure. So if I may, if I'm what I'm hearing correctly, I think these are all things that could be conditioned as far as where the construction access goes. And I think my other kind of two thoughts just to throw out to the group is I think probably having some sort of pre-construction meeting on the site with surveyor, construction company, landscape, whoever's going to do the pool construction, to go over all of those things in the field and have everything very clearly marked. And I think my other thought is, and understanding that grading is to come, but for the physical construction of the wall, if it's able to get a permit, is it may not be a really bad idea to have the 50-foot setback marked by some level of construction fence or something that's there that provides a visual barrier so they can see where that's supposed to go. That's not really in the way, and as then they get to the grading, may be able to remove that finish grade around it, but then at least there's some assurance that the wall is in the correct space, even above and beyond the surveying and the work that was done, and it will keep vehicles and things out of that area if that's will be helpful. I think that's something that could certainly be included in the order.
Thank you, Jeff. Dave, did you have a comment?
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Jeff. You said a lot of what I was going to just present. I think having installed, dug, formed, and shotgunite pools, I don't see any problem with this with the proper conditioning and the proper supervision by the contractor, that there'd be any problem working within that closeness to the 50-foot. Jeff spelled it out very well. With everybody getting together with a meeting and the knowledge of where they have to be and where they can't go, I think it's something that can be achieved pretty easily. And my concern too is for the pitch, but I'm comfortable with the mitigation that you're providing. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Seth, you had something to say?
Yeah, I think this will be my final comment on this application, but just getting back to the pitch pine mitigation, 2-to-1 is nice, but if the applicant's willing to do 3-to-1, I think more native species to offset development is always better. So if you're willing to do that, let's take them up on that.
Keep losing the full video.
Yeah, we would be absolutely willing to do that. We can up that number to 60. We can provide a revised plan with that note. We're hoping that would be acceptable. It wouldn't hold us up for another meeting, but we would be happy to provide a revised plan stating that we'll plant 60 trees there.
Thank you, Mark. Jeff, I have a kind of a follow-up to what you just said. So is it possible, and I think it is, but for these pools that are going in the buffer zone, can we start requiring the pool companies, like to have a pool company always named with the pool so that we ensure that the pool company knows the rules?
Yeah, it would be just similar to anytime we require a landscaper or licensed herbicide, pesticide, or fertilizer applicator. I think you could certainly require that the permit holder file, kind of an annual, here's who's doing our landscaping, here's who's doing our pool. And then it's something that, we can always follow up on, or also something that's very clear that, whoever's doing that work needs to be given a copy of any order of conditions or relevant materials to ensure that they know what's required of them to do. So I even think you could even require notice for, the pool company to provide, an approximate service date, if there's date where they're going to be putting water in or putting water out. Again, any of those things that are to protect the interest in knowing where that water is going and what's happening is something certainly you guys can condition.
Thank you, Jeff. Dave?
Madam Chair, that's an excellent idea. So many pools that we have going in, and in situations like this where it raises legitimate concerns from everybody, I think knowing the players in the pool business is as important as we need to know the players in the landscaping business and how they're reacting on different jobs and conducting themselves. I think that's excellent.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from commissioners before we go to the public? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have comments from the public?
We did. I cheated and answered it on YouTube, but RJ Turcott from the Nantucket Land Council asked a question if would these trees still be protected under an ongoing order of conditions if the property changed hands again? We have seen other applicants attempt to distance themselves from an order once new owners are involved. And I kind of gave them the short answer that the order of conditions is recorded against the deed or certificate of title and is carried forward until a certificate of compliance is issued. And then that certificate of compliance gets recorded against that same deed or title and can have ongoing conditions and all of those things. And those are carried forward in perpetuity. So no matter how many times the owner changes, those requirements can still get carried forward on the title. So they'd still be obligated to follow those conditions.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So with that, if there's no other questions from commissioners, Jeff, do we have everything we'd need to close?
We do have all of the required information.
Mark, would you like to close at this point?
Yes, please.
Okay. Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Dave. Is there a second? Seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Cheryl Gilbert at 16 D Street, represented by Don Bracken.
Hello, Don Bracken, Bracken Engineering, representing the owner. This project is a septic system upgrade on the existing property that has an existing 2-bedroom house and a small 1-bedroom cottage. The existing system is an old Title V system with a 1,000-gallon tank and a leaching pit, which is located on the north side of the house toward the resource areas. In this case, the closest resource area is a coastal bank. Bank is defined by definition. The 100-year flood zone, which is elevation 8, intersects the bank. So the top of the bank is basically the top of the slope, which also represents the limit of the lawn area behind the house, facing Hither Creek. The other resource area further away is Salt Marsh and then Hither Creek. The plan is to replace the existing septic system with a new system, which includes innovative alternative denitrification treatment system, a microfast tank located off the northwest corner of the house, going into a shallow subsurface system that will have over 6-foot separation between the bottom of the system and groundwater. The system is located further from the resource areas than the existing leaching pit is. And it's also located in the back because of the existing wells surrounding the property, particularly the well on the property to the west. The property itself is connected to town water. They replaced their well, I think, within the last few years. In summary, all the work is within existing disturbed lawn areas that will be revegetated again as lawn. It's fairly flat in that area. We don't expect any erosion. The other component that we've added to the system is an impervious barrier buried around the system on the side where the coastal bank is, in order to ensure that there will be no breakout into the bank itself. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, are there any questions from the public at this point? No.
No, ma'am.
Do we have everything we'd need to close this one?
Yes, you do.
Don, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to close?
So moved.
Motion made by Beal. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Coleman,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to Jean Francois Formella at 8 Old Westmore Farm Road, represented by Paul Santos.
Thank you. Paul Santos on behalf of the owner and applicant, JF Formella. This is a notice of intent application for work at 8 Old Westmore Farm Road. This property was before you within the last few months, in which we filed the request for determination of applicability to confirm the resource areas, those resource areas being a bordering vegetated wetland and the limits of a certified vernal pool that occurs on the abutting and a portion of this property. This application is for the redevelopment of the property, which would entail the removal and or demolition of 2 of the structures, what's known as the red barn and the green barn. Both of those structures are actually outside of commission jurisdiction, but the work associated with that is very close to the 100-foot, so we included that as part of our application. We will also be removing the existing gazebo, which is within Concom jurisdiction and actually falls within the regulated setback, the no-build setback for the vernal pool. The gazebo has been there for some time and was constructed before the designation of the vernal pool. So the 2 existing structures will be removed and the gazebo will be removed. We'll then in turn redevelop the site by constructing a new single-family dwelling that will again occur outside of the 100-foot buffer zone, but we will be constructing a small garage that will occur within the buffer zone. It will be outside of the enlarged setback to the vernal pool, which increases the 50-foot no build to 75 feet. So we will be outside of that setback with the garage. And this garage is a modest 1-story, approximately 28 by 18 feet in dimension. The driveway will then also be reconfigured to accommodate the relocated dwelling and the relocated garage. The work occurs outside of any mapped NHESP jurisdictional area, and there are no waivers required with the application. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission or staff may have.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, are there any questions from the public on this one?
We have not had any questions or comments, but we also do have all of the required information before you ask that question too.
Okay, thank you. So Paul, since there's no questions and we have all the required information, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion to close? Motion made by Seth. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to 11 Crooked Lane LLC at Westchester Street Extension, and this is represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm before you tonight with a notice of intent application to install a low-pressure sewer force main along the traveled way of Westchester Street Extension. This is the road that runs in alongside of the animal hospital and the backside of some of the properties that known as Hickory Meadow Lane. And shown on the plan in front of you in blue is the bordering vegetated wetland boundary. Shown in red are the 25, 50, and in some cases 100-foot buffer zone. And then shown in green is the proposed 1.5-inch sewer force main. The pipe would be installed in a trench approximately 4 feet deep, 3 foot wide. Pipe would be, it would be excavated, pipe installed, and then backfilled. There would be laterals left, which are the green T's, if you will, running off of the line to serve several of the properties along Hickory Meadow Lane, as well as the property at 1 Westchester Street Extension. The sewer force main will replace on-site septic systems and therefore, I believe, provide an overall net benefit. There has been a extension permit issued from the sewer department, and we just need to make sure that we're all set with the wetland permitting before we go ahead and install this. And again, for the most part, we're on the opposite side of a gravel or asphalt road. We are waiting for review from National Heritage, so we'll ultimately need to request a continuance. The mapped area is just at the very end of the road. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions or concerns you may have with the application.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have any questions or comments from the public?
No, we do not.
Okay. Well, it sounds like, Art, you need to continue for 2 weeks for Heritage.
Yes, please.
So would you like to continue until October 29th?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this will continue. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Before we continue, can I ask a quick question?
Yep,
Is this something that for the next meeting you guys would like a positive order for?
I would think so.
It seemed
Yeah.
like it.
And thumbs up and a few head shakes, yes.
Good enough for me.
All right, so that moves us on in the public meeting to request for determination. We have Alan B. Myers at 28 Kelly Road, represented by Don Bracken.
Hi again, Don Bracken, representing the applicant. It's a pretty straightforward application to install two 1.25-inch sewer force mains within the existing roadway of Kelly Road. There are already 2 stubs there. The existing sewer main already exists. Where we tie into those 2 stubs is outside the 50-foot buffer zone from the wetland line, which we took from a 2009 subdivision plan. All work will be within the 100-foot buffer. All work will be within the existing roadway area and existing driveway area with no removal of vegetation. Both the septic system for number 28, number 30 will be replaced with these new sewer force mains. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Don. Are there any questions from commissioners? Jeff, has staff been out to this one, and do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, I do. I know Don said the wetland line is from 2009, but we went around and took a look and feel like it's still fairly accurate for the areas in question. So we feel comfortable in recommending the -3 to allow the work without the notice of intent.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Is there a motion to issue a -3 allowing the work without a notice? Motion made by Mark. Is there a second?
Second,
Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that brings us on to, is it Duarte New Dirt at 18 Dukes Road, represented by Don Bracken.
Yes, very similar to the last application. This is converting from a septic system to tying in to an existing sewer force main located on the same side of the road as the property. The sewer force main will be 1.25 inches, and it will be run from the back of the property to the road, all within existing disturbed areas on the lot. Again, when the main goes in, it'll probably be backfilled the same day or the next day. The wetland resource areas were taken from GIS. They're both off-site from the property. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Don. Are there any questions from commissioners? No. Jeff, has staff been out to this one? And do you have a recommendation?
Yes, we would recommend the -3 for this one as well.
Thank you. Is there a motion to issue a -3 allowing for the work without a notice? Motion made by Seth. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I seem to have lost my video. I can't, trying to get it back here.
That's okay. We see your name, so we know what square is yours. All right, so that'll move us on to Sea Hero LLC at 7 Pilgrim Road, represented by Mark Ritz.
Good evening, Mark Ritz from Site Design, representing the applicants at 7 Pilgrim Road. This property had, we had done an RDA on this property previously that allowed the construction of a house, a pool, a retaining wall, grading, etc. The resource area is an off-site wetland. The 50-foot buffer zone is just northeast of our northeast property corner. The applicant has reconfigured the house and some of the other features on the property slightly. The scope of work has not really changed, but because it was originally an RDA, we couldn't come in and ask for a modification. So we are back before you with another RDA asking for essentially the same thing that was previously approved with just a different shaped house within the 100-foot buffer. All of the site alteration, grading, and removal of what was previously there has already been completed.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions from commissioners about this one? Jeff, has staff been out to review?
Yes, and we're recommending the -3 for the work as well.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to issue a -3 allowing for the work without a notice? Motion made by Seth. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you. And that moves us on to John Adams Realty Trust at 97 Cliff Road, represented by Mark Ritz.
Once again, Mark Ritz from Site Design, representing the applicants at 97 Cliff. This is a property that was previously developed. There's a house, a pool, all the usual amenities. The wetland resource area in question is what would probably be best described as a ditch along between the property and the bike path. what the applicant is proposing to do is to enlarge an existing shed, which is just outside of the 50-foot buffer. There is a shed with an outdoor shower on it. They would like to make the shed larger and keep the outdoor shower. Everything is outside the 50 to the off-site wetland.
Thank you, Mark. Were there any questions from commissioners about this one? All right. Has staff been out to check this?
Hi, yes, we have, and we recommend a +2, -3.
Thank you, Joanne. So is there a motion to issue a +2 and a -3?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelbart,
Aye.
Erisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you.
And that moves us on to minor modifications. Trust of Richard Phillips at 19 East Tristram's Avenue, represented by Paul Santos.
Thank you. On behalf of Richard Phillips, the property owner, this is a minor modification request to a notice of intent that was issued by the commission for essentially construction of a driveway within the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. The bordering vegetated wetland is located to the south off-site. It's essentially a drainage ditch that feeds a pipe that runs through the Phillips property. So this application, we are simply moving the driveway a slight amount to the east, and the proposed garage that was on the property is getting moved closer to the south. While the garage is moving, it's still outside of the 100-foot buffer zone to the bordering vegetated wetland. The driveway was in the BVW buffer zone previously, and it still will be. It's just been relocated further to the east along East Tristram Avenue. That's the extent of the minor modification, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, do we have everything we need to issue the minor mod?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to issue the minor mod? Motion made by Seth. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to certificates of compliance. We have Nancy Seaman at 9 Hollowell Lane, represented by Art Casparo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have prepared the plan before you. The dune line is shown in blue, the 25 and 50-foot buffer zones in red, and then down in the southwest corner, a little piece of the 100-foot buffer zone. And this was essentially a redevelopment project, and as well as a substantial septic upgrade, where we used an Oaks and Perkrite type leach system and elevated it in the limited area that's available on the opposite side of the house from the resource area. And we believe the work's been completed in substantial compliance, and be happy to address any concerns or questions there may be.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, has staff been out to look at the site?
Yes, and we would agree with Mr. Gasparo's assessment that the site is in compliance.
Okay. So is there a motion to issue the certificate?
So moved.
I'm going to give it to Mark on this one. We're going to have to go another time for the second. So who wants second?
Thank you.
Seth? Go.
All right. So we'll give the second to Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
And that moves us on to 34 Walsh Street LLC at 34 Walsh Street, represented by Mark Ritz.
Once again, Mark Ritz from Site Design, representing the applicant at 34 Walsh. The project before you allowed for the modification of an existing residence. There were a few bump outs. There were a few areas that were converted from covered patio to structure, etc. There was also a requirement to fence off a portion of the lawn that was within the buffer zone right up to the wetland, and to replant it with native shrubs. The work has been completed and is in substantial compliance with the order. I believe Jeff has been out to the site to review it with the landscaper, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions from commissioners? So Jeff, what is staff's opinion on this one?
So staff agrees, but we're also recommending to carry forward condition 19 that required the annual photo monitoring of that area since it was just installed, to get another couple years of those photos done. But fence is in, the plants are in, everything looks good so far.
Thank you, Jeff. So is there a motion to issue the cert with condition 19 ongoing? Motion made
So
by
moved.
Motion made by Dave. Is there a second?
Yes.
Seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Mark. Jeff, do we need to do anything with the 247 LLC, or was that just a mistake on the sheet?
Yeah, that was on me. This is what happens when Joanne goes away, is we left it on the agenda and we issued it at the last meeting. So we can't hear anything that we've already done. So that was crossed out, but since we had posted it with it on there, wanted to mark it so everyone knew for sure that it had been issued.
Thank you. All right, so that'll move us on to orders of conditions. Hopefully everybody got these in their email before the meeting. And we will begin with Kim Glowacki at 46 Easton Street.
So just to kind of walk everyone through, for those who don't remember, this was the kind of moving of the historic structure and redevelopment of a lot that had been put into two different lots that we discussed at pretty great length. I did catch another typo on this from earlier. I had the filing date incorrect on the order that's in front of you there, so I would need to correct that to the correct date that's on the other one correctly. You guys had asked for me to draft two orders. So one of them is a positive order, and that's the one that's on the screen right now. And just to kind of point out, there's a few different things than normal on this. Obviously, when we're looking at these, we're applying both the state act and the local bylaw. So we had also talked about potentially issuing a different permit out under the local bylaw and the state act. So if we issued out a joint permit under both, the sentences and the conditions and things that are in italics would apply if this was issued a positive order under both, and the italics are specific to requirements and portions of the local bylaw. Does that make sense to everybody? And then the second order that I drafted that's not up right now, the negative order that was requested, I drafted specifically to the local bylaw that we had talked about last time.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay. So commissioners, what are our thoughts on this? Jeff, do you recommend, oh, Dave?
Well, I mean, are we going to vote on one or the other? Or I think I have to say, I think this is the first time one's come across since I've been on the board like this.
Yeah, I think I remember maybe one other that Jeff drafted two of, but yes, I think we need to get an idea of where the board sits. Jeff?
So if I may, I think the easiest way to handle this may be to kind of break it into the act and the bylaw, and then see kind of where you're going under each, because the requirements are different. You know, the buffer zones are less for the state. And we talked a little bit about it last time, that meeting the state performance standards for this site is certainly simpler than the local, and the local is what will be requiring the waivers to things like the 50-foot setback and that kind of thing. So I think maybe stepping through the positive order and reviewing it from the state aspects first, and seeing if that's a direction, and seeing where the board feels from there, and then maybe tackling the local bylaw separately. Or you can certainly, you know, kind of take the tenor of the board and see where everyone kind of is feeling about it in general, and go from there too. But I think that would probably be the easiest way.
Okay. So I guess let's look at the first order and go through the state first.
Do you want me to drive a little bit, Madam Chair? Would that be helpful?
Sure.
Sure. So just to kind of run through the permit for some stuff that's not normal, obviously we have our regular permit overview. But then in our additional finding section, had a finding that was clear that the new structure on the eastern lot is not a pre-1978 structure. I know that's kind of obvious, but wanted to call that out for sure. And then I also, after reviewing some of the earlier submission materials where it was brought up, wanted to specifically recommend that we find that those structures are not water dependent. Excuse me. So then to run through the conditions that we put in there, they're really primarily centered around the knotweed removal portion. So conditions, 19 through 24 kind of go to that aspect of the project very specifically, with some monitoring that's there, with some additional monitoring requirements related to the dune. And then sorry, I'm trying to look at it on my split screen here. Condition 25, which is that report that we've been asking for as far as fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides with the soil test required to even use fertilizers on the site, incorporated within there. And then, sorry to jump back, but I missed something. In condition 22, looking at the knotweed area specifically, but then that report also to include the edge of dune to track any dune migration through there, or what's happening on the site. And then if we go with a positive order under the local bylaw, condition 26 is something that's required, that we flag out that coastal engineering structures are not allowed. And then there's a pretty extensive waiver section there that I won't read for everybody here. Hopefully everyone read it or can read it.
Thank you, Jeff. So with this one, if we go with the positive order, do we need a lighting condition for this one? That all lights are away from the resource areas?
If you guys would like one, I can certainly add. I would put it as, I would bump down the italicized condition 26 to make that 27. And then a condition 26 that all exterior lighting be directed away from the resource areas.
Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a variety of things that stand out to me. The first is I see it mentioned that the new structure on the eastern lot is not a pre-1978 structure, but have we looked at whether the old structure that's going to be renovated due to it being substantially improved? What's the classification on whether that has qualification or not? So that would be the western lot.
Jeff?
So I thought about that a lot, Seth, and I think if we were to issue a positive order under the local bylaw, we could certainly add a finding that that building had been substantially improved. Again, when I wrote this, I was looking more under the state order. So not the state order, the state act. So if you feel like we're going to issue a positive under the local, then we certainly could add that finding. But the substantially improved isn't part of the state act.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you for clarifying. I guess we can keep that in mind when we discuss the local act or the local bylaw. The next thing is since there is a bulkhead that is by policy a coastal bank, do we need to call out coastal bank as a resource area and permit overview, or is it not important?
Excuse me, I have coastal beach twice. That second beach is supposed to be bank. So thank you for catching that. But yes, that is correct.
All right, thank you. And then the next thing is related to the rainfall infiltration system that's being proposed to direct the rainwater under the houses. I know that we got in the plan a permit drawing of that and some classification or some description of like this species that would be planted. Do we need a survivability condition of those plants in that area? And do we also need any other conditions to relate to that part of the project, or is it kind of covered in the permit already, the plans already?
I don't know if number 23 covers the native species in the planting area that you're talking about, or if that's just for the like replanted area. So that's a good question for Jeff.
Yeah, I thought that was related to the knotweed removal, but it might be general to both.
I mean, we could certainly specify. I think I had intended to be general to both, but I think you would have that condition, just if I might recommend, that would say, should the project area show less than 50% regrowth of native species within the first 2 years and 6 months of the permit, the applicant shall file a new notice or amendment, plantings or seedings. And then I think you could continue by saying any plantings shall be maintained at I know we've been doing 90% survivorship. So you say any planting shall be maintained at a 90% survivorship. Trying to think of a good way to I think you'd say any planting shall be maintained at a 90% survivorship for the site. And that would kind of pick up the whole area.
Great. And then related to the roof drainage going under the buildings, do we need any conditions to go with that? I mean, I don't have anything off the top of my head, but
If I could, Seth, just to kind of throw out there, I think if you wanted to encapsulate it in a condition, we could add another new condition on the end that would simply say all impervious surface runoff shall be directed to on-site infiltration systems. And that would kind of catch all.
Perfect.
Thank you, Seth. Those are great amendments. Any other,
Madam Chair?
Ian?
Yes. Would it be a good idea to memorialize the 5-foot pedestrian access easement, even though it's a condition of a Chapter 91 license, and maybe add that it be marked in such a way that the public will be aware that there is a 5-foot pedestrian access easement?
Yeah, that's a good idea, Ian. Jeff, is that something that's within our purview to ask for?
So I would say one is yes. And I did call out the maintenance of a public access easement within the permit overview. But I think if you wanted to add a condition, what would be 28 at this point, that says the public access shall be marked.
Marked?
Shall
Yeah.
be clearly marked.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
I think you would say the public access shall be clearly marked on both the street and water side of the property. So that way they have a sign on each end or something that's marked with public access.
Right.
From both
Good.
ends.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Okay, that looks like no. So I guess we should move through the local denial now. Jeff,
So,
can you lead us?
I think the easy way to go through it and not to have to go through that whole document or put it up on the screen per se is, I think the discussion with the conditions that are in place is really centers around whether or not the commission feels that the burden of proof has been met to issue waivers to the things that are listed in that permit. So waivers to the 25-foot setback, waivers to the 50-foot setback, and the other things that are listed in that denial. Let me bring it up. Sorry, my computer is not participating as well as it should right now.
So, Madam Chair, may I lead?
Yes, Ian. What are you trying
Thank
to
you. Well, as I was wavering last time, I thought it was a difficult decision and that I was worried they were setting a precedent. But on reflection with Dan Bailey's arguments, about eliminating the plan to reconstruct the bulkhead and everything else that he said, and then listening to my fellow commissioners, Dave and Joe, I decided there was sufficient net benefit that I've decided that I would approve it. So, and it's it's a Solomonic decision, where you've got the baby cutting it in half. But I guess really with Easton Street being the way it is, I feel that there is a net benefit overall. So there we have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. So Jeff, you were gonna go through the standards.
Sure. So I think I pulled them out in the denial itself. So the first kind of findings that are there, so findings 4 through 8 are pretty basic findings of what the interests are for each resource area that's present on the lot. So I won't bother to read through all of those for everyone. And then just to kind of summarize, I grouped them by resource area. So coastal beach, that first one is related to the 25-foot and 50-foot structure setback, where the beach and the dune transition is a little bit fuzzy there. So I included it. excuse me. And then 2.03B2 is coastal dune, and that's the same 25 and 50 foot setback requirements. Then there's a B3. This relates to the disturbance of the vegetated cover or excavation on the dune, and that kind of is through the filling in behind the bulkhead and the work adjacent to the dune. And then number 12 is 203B6. What was that, Joe? 203B6. Again, this has to deal with potentially destabilizing the dune. It's an applicable pouring standard for the fact that the work is in such proximity that it's within 100. I think the next one, number 13B7, is very applicable to this one, that no activity shall be permitted other than the maintenance and repair of a structure existing on the effective date of these regulations that will result in construction of a building upon a coastal dune or within 50 feet of any dune. So that would need to be waived as well. 205B3 is the coastal bank. So the coastal bank in this case is the bulkhead itself for the portion that's exposed. And that's the effect on bank height, stability, wildlife habitat, vegetation, scenic views, or the use of a bank as a sediment source in this case, which I don't think is applicable for the sediment source given it's the bulkhead. The next one is the standard buffer zone portion. And then the 16 is the 2110B1. This is related to land subject to coastal storm flowage, that the work shall not reduce the ability of the land to absorb and contain floodwaters. To go through, and then the last two there are that they've failed to meet the burden of proof for the granting of the waivers under no adverse impact, no reasonable alternative, and the long-term net benefit.
Thank you, Jeff.
So, and with that, not to keep talking, I think it's important when you guys look at the activities on the site, even if the overall project is a net benefit, I think you need to also discuss whether or not you feel that certain activities would require the waiver under no adverse impact, no reasonable alternative, or a net benefit. Because I think my concern in kind of reviewing similar decisions and discussions before is you want to be careful for what gets a waiver and how it's justified, in the sense that if you justify it for one, I think we all know that we'll see attempts or really similar things to come back in using any decision as reasoning to do that. I mean, we've seen it with this project already. So I would just keep that in mind. And if you guys have any questions about how that applies or how we've applied that historically, I'm happy to answer those.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question through you?
Yes, Ian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Jeff, I consider public access to the beach, even though it's under Chapter 91, as a really significant benefit. Would you give me any sort of background as to where we've opened the door to something else by granting waivers at that level?
In relation,
I know.
In relation specifically to public access?
Well, public access in this situation where we are, if we approved, then we basically are granting a waiver to new construction, even though, you know, there are the discussions about the benefits of raising the buildings and flow, you know, storm flow and a smaller footprint within the 50 than there was before. So I'd like your take on to what extent we might be opening the door, considering that we're granting that it would come with public access to the beach, which I consider important.
Yeah, so obviously I think what you're looking at, Ian, is how you're applying the interest. So obviously a public access component to the beach is something that is going to directly benefit the interest of something like recreation for just getting to the beach and that kind of access point that's there. And I think that has its own merits. I mean, I think the real question, and I think the commission discussed it at great length, is really related to, completely new construction within the 50-foot setback.
Right.
To both the dune and the bank in this case, and maybe the beach, depending upon where you break apart the dune and the beach, and how that relates to moving the existing structure. And I know we've historically moved structures and even rebuilt structures kind of in kind for things that have been moved. I think the real interesting thing in this one, and I think it's worth discussion, is the existing structure is being moved onto what is now a new lot, and now there would be a new vacant lot that's getting new construction, and whether or not they've met the burden of proof to demonstrate that that's having a net benefit, or that there's no adverse impacts and no reasonable alternatives that allow the project to proceed in compliance with the regulations. So I think that's honestly the real crux of it in this case.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, you had a question or comment, and then Seth.
Yeah, I do. I disagree with Ian on the public access being a linchpin item. I know that there are two fairly nearby public accesses that were private, White Elephant being one, and that's a much better public access. People can walk along, look at the boats, look at the harbor, look at the steamship coming and going. The other one that I know of is the new Great Harbor Yacht Club. They have a public access there, and that's rarely used. I mean, I'm down there, I don't say all the time, but fairly often, and it's not used at all. And I don't see the significance of this public access being important. What are you going to do when you walk down there? It's a narrow beach. You'll have to climb over a steel wall to get up on the White Elephant waterfront. I just don't think it's a significant factor. I think building in the resource area is much more significant that we should not allow. And I don't weigh the public benefit as being overriding what I think will be a bad decision on our part. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've thought a lot about these waiver provisions that we have related to the different activities being requested by the applicant. And independent of how I feel about those activities, in my mind, really all of them fall into the waiver in section C, which is related to a long-term net benefit, since the other waiver in section A, which talks about no adverse impacts, no alternatives, I think it's been suggested by parties both on the commission and, well, I think it exists. I think all reasonable alternatives exist for this project. It might not be what the applicant is seeking to develop or do, but I think reasonable alternatives exist. Adverse impacts, that's a little bit harder to get into. We can dig down into each one of the activities, but it's my understanding that that waiver requirement, you have to fulfill both sections. You have to fulfill both the no adverse impacts and the no reasonable alternatives. So if there are reasonable alternatives, I don't know if we necessarily need to get into the adverse impacts or not. In my opinion, everything is whether the project activities can be justified under the long-term net benefit provision. And yeah, that's the job of the commission to figure out right here. But I would much rather see that waiver being used in this case personally.
Thank you, Seth. Maureen?
Yeah, I also, I'm sure like all of us, have spent a lot of time trying to weigh these things and being aware of the fact that moving, there'll be a net reduction in coverage within the 50. but we would be allowing new construction. And also, and that the existing house getting moved would then be upon footings so that, coastal storm flowage would be also mitigated there. But I cannot get past putting a new building in the 50 because of wanting to, provide more development on this lot. I don't think that we should, I don't think that we should grant a waiver when it is, when it's just not clear to me that there's going to be a net benefit, a net long-term benefit for this piece of property. I am sorry for the owner that they can't have, have two dwellings now, upon this lot. I understand, why that would be, useful for the owner to have that. But I do not think it's good for the resource area to have this new building on it. And I went back and forth, and Ian's, change of heart, if you will. I totally understand why he's saying that, and I've gone back and forth myself. But when I look at, especially in the denial, the conditions, let me just look at those again. Right, so the condition number 13 under 2.03B7, and let's see, not that all of these aren't important, I think that is really critical. And then number 16, that they have not met the burden of proof under 210B1, that the work shall not reduce the ability of the land to absorb and contain floodwaters. I just don't think that has to be proved. The burden of proof is to my mind, it's very difficult to meet in this kind of situation where you're trying to add construction and move construction and have all the construction be raised. I don't see that we have enough data, and I don't know how it could be done, frankly, to produce a burden of proof that warrants us to allow new construction within the 50. I think it would not be a good precedent for us to follow. And I understand that the attorney for the applicant, he made some very creative and arguments about what we had allowed on other plots, other lots along that area. But there was not one where we allowed this kind of thing, where we allowed, some good things over here, but allowing brand new construction where there hasn't been anything. I don't think there's adequate precedent. I don't think we have data to show that this is going to be a long-term net benefit. So I do not think they've met the burden of proof, and I would not grant the waiver.
Thank you, Maureen. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? I know I agree with Seth. When I looked at this, I don't see this as meeting the no reasonable alternative waiver. I also don't feel like I could grant them the long-term net benefit. I think in order to do that, the restoration would need to be a lot more robust for me. And I think with the structure, the new structure being within the 50, without, a really robust dune restoration, I just don't see the long-term net benefit here with this one. So, Jeff, do you recommend we vote on both orders and see where it lands? Do you think we've had enough discussion?
I mean, I think the one point that I think should still come up a little bit, and then I might change my recommendation a little bit, is I think if you guys could have a little bit more discussion centered around the difference between whether or not relocating the existing structure and elevating it provides a net benefit, and then with that, having the net benefit of doing that, whether or not that new structure that's currently not there would be able to be granted a net benefit, or if you feel that that would solely be required to fall within that no adverse impact, no reasonable alternative. I think that's the one, I don't want to say hole that we haven't discussed yet, but I think that's the establishing clearly what waivers you would be looking at for the new structure through that vein, I think is something that we haven't really discussed yet.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Maureen?
Thank you, Jeff. I actually, obviously, I did not make it very clear, but that was what I was trying to say, that I did not think that when you looked at the positive of moving the old house back and raising it, is enough to say that that is therefore more than balances the impact of the new construction. And I just, and it's, I don't see the data supporting that. And we have the 50-foot buffer is a very important one. We do waive it when there's no alternative. I mean, whether, it's a septic system issue or, things like that. But this is nothing, this does not rise to that. And in comparing the moving the old and adding a new becomes a net benefit. I don't think they've met the burden of proof. I think it's a pretty high burden. And there's just not enough data for me to say, oh yes, that's very clear. And I would have to be able to say, I think that's clear. And just because the old structure is being moved and raised, to allow another structure, it changes the overall surface area. It will change how that piece of land, I think it will change that piece of land, how it operates, as part of that very developed area. And I think it is a net benefit, frankly, it's a benefit to not only that area, but to adjoining areas as well, to have a lot which is, less developed than others. So I come down on that, as a denial because of that. And again, I wish, and it's not, this isn't a slam dunk by any means, and but I just can't get past the building anew in the 50 and I just don't think they've met that very high burden of proof. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen.
So, Madam Chair?
Oh, yep, Ian?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So, I mean, Maureen and Mark obviously are bringing up salient issues that speaking for myself, that I've wrestled with. And I wonder whether if the public access tied into the White Elephant's public access, if that if Mark would consider that a net benefit. And in addressing Maureen's concerns, I mean, I think you put your finger on it, that it's a highly developed area. So, but then when Jeff talks about being careful how any decision might be used, I certainly wouldn't want to establish a precedent where people would argue in a court of law that because a waiver had been given to a new construction within our 50-foot boundary, that would open the floodgates to more, other applications at that level. So, would you like to comment on that aspect specifically, Jeff? Or is that beyond your brief to try to balance the net benefit against setting a precedent?
Jeff?
Sure,
Thank you,
I'm happy
Madam Chair.
I'm happy to comment. So I think the part that, you need to consider when interpreting the act and the bylaw both is the buffer zones that are set forth for the very purpose that those activities are presumed to have an adverse impact if they cross that line. And structures under the local bylaw are presumed to have an adverse impact inside the 50-foot setback. That's why it requires a waiver of that regulation to go in. So and the 25 works the same way. The 25 undisturbed buffer zone is any activity inside that 25-foot buffer zone is presumed to have an adverse impact on the buffer zone and the resource area. So that's kind of the fundamental of it. And I think that's why when I asked the question about looking at the net benefit for the structure relocating, if that benefit of that structure relocating still applied to an all new structure, I think that's going to be a real important point in either decision, either way is, if that structure solely has to stand on the idea of no adverse impact, no reasonable alternatives, because the benefit of moving the structure only applies to the existing structure. I mean, to me, that's, and why I asked, and maybe I didn't ask very clearly and beat around the bush a little bit when I said it, is my concern thinking about it in the future is if moving a structure out and farther away grants you the ability to construct a whole new structure, I think that's a very major decision for the commission. If, relocating one structure away, farther away, and having it qualify under the net benefit, if building an all new structure falls within the same benefit of moving the existing structure, I think that's going to be a real important point for this commission to be very clear about how that applies.
So, Madam Chair, may I ask an additional question, please?
Yes, Ian.
Thank you. So I absolutely take your point, Jeff, but in this situation where it's, where there are properties on either side that are right up basically to the water, and where your condition 26 states that as required by 205B8 of the Town of Nantucket Wetland Protection Regulations, that no coastal engineering structure of any kind should be permitted on an eroding bank in the future to protect the project allowed by this permit. This actually isn't an eroding bank, is it? So from that point of view, it wouldn't be establishing a precedent. And the fact that they are in a flood zone where the buildings are, where the existing building is being brought back and lifted, if there was also a requirement that the public access tie into the White Elephant's public access, you could argue that those as mitigating circumstances were sufficient so that they, could you argue, let me rephrase that, do you think that you could argue that that would allow sufficient mitigating circumstances in this particular application that it couldn't be used as precedent going forward?
Jeff, do you have a response to that one?
I don't want to make it sound like I'm advocating for one way or the other, but I think the question is, I mean, you obviously have to look at all of the aspects of the project a little bit individually first, and then the project as a whole. And I mean, I understand your point about the public access. I mean, the public has the right to access already on that site in the riparian zone. I mean, that's a well-established right that's through there. Whether they can scurry up onto the bulkhead at the White Elephant is, you know, maybe some people can and some people can't. There's no stairs or ladder there to make that happen at this point. And I don't know if Chapter 91 reviews this, if that's something that they're going to require or not. You know, our act and bylaw don't really get into that public access component as clearly as the Waterfronts Act and Chapter 91 does. You know, we're focused more on resource area impacts and buffer zone impacts and how those relate to the interests that are there. I always caution the commission against, you know, always, you know, it's a fine line to balance an activity against another activity, to say that the benefit of this activity outweighs the impacts of a different activity, because I think you set yourself up for an endless cycle of, you know, debating whether in this case it does or it doesn't to some degree. I mean, I think establishing the reasoning for each aspect of the project is important, and then looking at the collective at the end is going to be essential for any decision that comes in a matter like this.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Well, it does in a sense. I mean, I absolutely don't want to undermine the legal standing of the Conservation Commission, obviously. So, and thank you so much for you know, your exhaustive drafting on both sides of the issue. Thank you.
No problem.
So Seth, I think you had a comment, and then Maureen.
Thank you. So I hate to treat this like an accounting problem, but it's really important to carefully consider what long-term net benefit means. It means you need to take a summary of all the benefits and all the costs and specifically prove that the benefits outweigh the costs over a sufficient length of time into the future. We don't necessarily have a benchmark period of time that long-term means. So I guess that's partially up for interpretation, but I'm willing to go through what I think the benefits are here, what I think the costs are, and then we can go from there. So, I mean, in my opinion, there's a benefit of invasive species removal with the Japanese knotweed that is going to occur on what will eventually be the westerly parcel. There's the benefit of improved stormwater passage with the existing dwelling being raised, and also, well, it's really with, I guess it's with the total amount of dwelling being raised above the flood zone. And then there's the benefit of the roof runoff being directed into infiltration directly in the ground. And then there's the last benefit of potential, well, this is sort of out of our purview anyway, but better access to, or better public access. The costs, in my opinion, are permitting a new unpermittable structure on what is essentially will become a vacant lot. That would be the easterly lot within the setbacks where that structure is not allowed given our bylaw. There's also the cost of increasing the square footage of the structure on the existing structure now, which would be the westerly lot. and there's the cost of increasing the total amount of structure within the 100-foot buffer. And then in terms of long-term, I guess we need to potentially have a discussion on what type of amount of years we're considering, because without a very robust coastal dune restoration and monitoring program here, a lot of the justification on behalf of the applicant for why this is a net benefit is because structure is moving, farther away from the resource area. But that resource area could change sufficiently over time. And yeah, they're gonna add some sand and plant some beach grass, but I don't think there's been a well thought out restoration plan to ensure that that coastal dune is, really functioning as it is, especially with the essentially failed bulkhead on site acting as a coastal bank. Who knows how those two resource areas will interact and what they'll do to the potential erosion in that area. So my assessment after looking at all those costs and benefits together over a sufficiently long-term time period is that the activities do not meet a long-term net benefit. They provide some benefits individually, but I don't see how that as a whole over an extended period of time, they're really upholding the long-term net benefit clause there. In terms of the no adverse impacts, no reasonable alternatives, I think that we could look at the new structure being proposed on the easterly lot in that context. But I think and maybe I'm maybe even willing to go with the fact that the adverse impacts are up for debate. But I think reasonable alternatives clearly exist. They could move that structure that's proposed within the 50-foot buffer outside of that buffer. So I think for that part of the project, they can't meet either waiver regulation for that easterly section. It's possible that they might meet the no adverse impact, no reasonable alternative for the westerly portion of the property, but not for the property as a whole, in my opinion.
Thank you, Seth. I appreciate your assessment of the benefits and costs, and I see adding a second structure as being a pretty big cost, because you have now two structures that in a storm flood situation both have their own separate utilities that need to be maintained during those storm scenarios. And by adding that second new dwelling with separate utilities, I see that as a big cost because of how close they are to these resource areas in a very active flood zone. So thank you for your assessment. Maureen, did you have a comment?
Yes, I was thinking about, when have we been willing to allow, let's say, just looking at moving the existing structure, making it larger, but moving it out of or entirely, I can't remember now exactly, getting more of it out of the 50 and raising it, those would all be, in my view, benefits. But if we were being asked to, only move the deal with the building on the westerly side, that I think I would feel much more comfortable. I mean, I would feel pretty comfortable, I think, based upon the fact that this is getting improved and it was there already. And, you know, with a lot of the things that we weigh in terms of adding additional development and looking at a very developed neighborhood, but a very dynamic neighborhood from a storm point of view, that would be okay. But to imagine if this were, there was nothing on this piece of land, and the applicant wanted to add a building that would be within the 50, you know, partly or completely. And I can't imagine us allowing such a thing, that there would be, as long as there was an alternative to put a building out of the 50. And so to me, it becomes clearer when I look at this as you bifurcate the steps and what would you do? And, you know, you allow one because you can see the balance of good versus, you know, more impact, even if it were a larger footprint. But the other one is clearly, if that was all there was, would clearly not be allowed. And so when I'm balancing looking at it that way, again, I come up with finding it that the rebuttable presumption of harm to the resource area has not been overcome.
Thank you, Maureen. Any other thoughts, Dave?
Yes. Well, I you know how I feel about this. I think the net benefits are justifiable or and able to be wavered through, of course, total reduction out of the 25, reduction out of the 50, elevating the structure that's there, and then possibly a new structure. I'm afraid that if this isn't granted, that nothing will happen, and we're always trying to improve the land under our that we have under our jurisdiction on the coast. And if that building is left there the way it is with the foundation it has no coastal flowage there. Again, like Maureen is saying, there is a building there, and it's not a good situation. So I think the benefit of allowing some structure in the 50 wavered is better than having the situation as it is at present.
Thank you, Dave. Any other final thoughts from commissioners? Jeff, do you feel like we've had a robust enough discussion to vote on the orders?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys touched upon all of the really necessary aspects that were really needed. So I guess it's up to you to decide which orders you want to issue. Keep in mind, if you guys go to issue the positive order, you'll need to decide whether it's under the state or local, and then you kind of go from there, because those italicized portions wouldn't apply if it's just under the state act.
Thank you. All right, so I guess someone should make a motion to approve one of these orders, and then we'll see where that vote goes. Does that make sense, Jeff? Yeah, so Dave, were you trying to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to vote on the approval order.
Okay. Jeff?
If I may, just to kind of keep it simple, I think if you could make it clear that you're making a motion to issue the approval under the state or under the state and local, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you, Jeff.
So
So Dave, you're trying to approve it under the state and the local?
yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, it's Ian. May I make,
Yep.
So Dave, May I address my
Yeah.
fellow commissioner through you?
Sure.
So Dave, I have to say that listening to my fellow commissioners and having wavered backwards and forwards, I would be loath to establish any precedents that would undermine 50-foot, separation requirements. Having listened to everyone, do you feel that that's a substantial worry, or do you feel that doesn't come into play here?
Well, I think, Ian, if Dave doesn't get a second on this motion, then we can move forward. I don't know that necessarily go into those details.
Yeah, I think it'll be established pretty quick here.
Yeah. So Dave made the motion. Is there a second? Looks like no. So that motion dies, essentially, for lack of a better term. Is there a motion to issue the denial? That motion made by Seth.
Sorry, before we get to there,
Yeah.
I think there's another step. Well, I was gonna say the motion to issue the approval on the basis of the state and the local order failed, but I'd like to make the motion to issue the approval on the basis of the state order only.
Okay, so the state order only and not the local. Jeff?
So not to hop on, Seth, if it's okay, I might recommend to say issuing the positive order under the state act, but removing the italicized language from that order, from that draft.
We'll make the motion to the effect that Jeff Carlson outlined.
Thank you, Seth. Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal, can you unmute?
So I'll just make it clear. This is a vote on issuing the positive order under the state act only.
Yes. So Beal?
No.
Okay. Engelborg?
Aye.
Arisman, no. Golding?
No.
LaFleur?
Aye.
Phillips?
I'm going to vote aye on the state.
Okay. So now we're in a tie situation.
Oh, no. Oh.
Which I have actually not been involved with before. So Jeff, where do we go when we're 3-3?
So without a majority, the motion does not carry.
Okay. So we'll move on. Seth?
So next, I'll make a motion to issue the denial order of conditions under the local bylaw only.
Thank you, Seth. Is there a second? Seconded by Maureen?
Yes.
Okay. So by roll vote, Beal?
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Dave, what?
I'm sorry. I lost video at Maureen's vote on the last vote. I'm having trouble. So I'm not sure where we're at, but I need to be brought up to speed. I'm sorry.
So we went 3-3 on the last vote, and since there was not a majority, that motion died. We moved on. Seth made a motion to issue the denial under the local bylaw, and that was seconded by Maureen. So now we're doing roll vote to issue the denial under the local bylaw.
Thank you. That's clear. I came in when Seth was making the motion, but I wasn't quite sure what had happened. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Continue.
So I'll start to roll vote that again. So Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
No.
Phillips.
Aye.
Okay, so that motion carries with Commissioner LaFleur opposed. Thank you, everybody, for working through that one. That was important discussion. Yes, Jeff?
We still have to make a decision about the state act at this point. So we've issued a denial under the local bylaw. We haven't issued a decision under the state act as of yet. So, because we didn't issue a positive on that. So as much as I hate to say it, we're going to have to go through the state a little bit more.
Okay.
Sorry.
No,
But
it's
we have to issue out a complete decision. So looking at the state act, we're obviously looking at a little different set of performance standards that are there. They don't have the same buffer zone requirements that we do. So we're going to have to vet out a little bit what we feel like doesn't meet the performance standards from the state to make a decision if we're going to go down that path. And then we'll have to, I'll have to draft a little bit on the fly to make this work, or if people change their mind the other direction, that can certainly happen.
okay.
So let me just get up my state act.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes, Ian?
is it appropriate for me to ask if we approve it at the state level, then we're setting it up?
Sorry.
Is it appropriate for me to ask that if we approve it at the state level, that we're setting it up for an automatic challenge legally?
No, I think that's a good question for Jeff. If we approve it under the state and deny it.
Yeah, so I'll try to answer what I think is the question there. So obviously the appeal track that we're all familiar with are two separate appeal tracks. So if you approve it under the state or you deny it under the state, their appellant body is DEP. And if you've already voted to deny it locally, so if it's appealed here, any appeal is going to be based upon the record that led you to that decision. So even if you issue out a state decision that's different, that's not necessarily applicable to the local bylaw performance standard review. So that you would see in Superior Court. So it's a little bit different. We've issued split decisions before, the commission has. It's not super common. But I think that's, if you look at it and feel that our bylaw is more restrictive and you can condition it through the state act where it doesn't require waivers and you don't have the ability to issue waivers, then you can condition it to be permissible, then you certainly have the right to issue that split decision because your job is to apply the standards of both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Any other base questions before we kind of step into the state regulations a little bit?
Looks like we're ready to go.
All right. So, so looking at the state, just kind of going to the coastal dune. So the first part with coastal dunes is making a basic determination of the following. So the dune is presumed to be significant to, sorry, no, I got it. Sorry, Joe. Is you need to make a determination whether or not the coastal dune is significant to storm damage prevention, flood control, or the protection of wildlife habitat. And if you make that determination, the standards that are in place are any alteration of or structure on a coastal dune or within 100 feet of a coastal dune shall not have an adverse effect on the coastal dune by affecting the ability of waves to remove sand from the dune, disturbing the vegetative cover as to destabilize the dune, causing any modification of the dune form that would increase the potential for storm or flood damage, interfering with the landward or lateral movement of the dune, causing removal of sand from the dune artificially, or interfering with mapped or otherwise identified bird nesting habitat. And then it continues, notwithstanding the provisions of this section, when a building already exists upon a coastal dune, a project accessory to the building may be permitted, provided that such work, using the best commercially available measures, minimizes the adverse effect on the coastal dune by the impacts listed in 310 CMR 1028-3B, which is disturbing the vegetative cover so as to not destabilize the dune. Such accessory project may include, but is not limited to, a small shed or small parking area for residences. It shall not include coastal engineering structures. And then there's another section. The following projects may be permitted provided they adhere to the provisions of that same portion. And that's pedestrian walkways, fencing, and other devices designed to increase dune development, and plantings compatible. And then there's a standard about rare species that doesn't apply in this case. So I think you would be having a discussion whether or not you felt that the project was, affecting that dune to migrate by wave action, disturbing the vegetative cover, interfering significantly with the landward or lateral movement of the dune, artificially moving sand, or interfering with bird nesting habitat to deal with the coastal dune.
Thank you, Jeff. Any thoughts from commissioners? Seth?
Yeah, there's one provision that definitely stood out to me. I think increasing the amount of structure on the site could interfere with the landward migration of the dune, since there would be a physical barricade in its way to move as sea level rise increases and erosion increases. We would project that dune to move, northwesterly towards the street. And if the structures are in the way, then it could potentially impact that possibility.
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Seth, I thought the same thing. It was the lateral movement of the dune that I saw as being impacted. Yes, Ian?
Well, with the greatest respect to you both, I don't really think of that dune as really going anywhere at this point. Am I taking too rigid a perspective? And I might add, I don't think it's a good idea to hinge an argument on that if it really, isn't.
Yeah, I think that's just part of the nature of dunes, is that they move and fluctuate. Like, they're a very dynamic resource area. So that provision just allows for them to continue to be dynamic and mobile. So I don't see that dune moving like next year necessarily, but I think over time, by putting those structures there, you're impeding the movement of the sand, and then you would be creating shading, so if they put in an argument, well, the sand can just move under the buildings, well, beach grass and things that would establish in a normal dune couldn't establish because there's physical buildings there blocking the light. So I think that's where that provision kind of comes from.
Thank you.
Seth, did you have a comment?
Yeah, well, it's great when the chair takes what you wanted to say and expresses it in better language than I could say. But a few things that are of a similar vein is that underneath the structures, it's not going to be grass, it's going to be gravel. So I guess sand theoretically could migrate onto that, but it would be very difficult for any type of dune plant to grow in that unless a sufficient amount of sand built up on top of that gravel, and there was some way to deal with the shading impacts from it being under a structure. I would assume that to be a very adverse area for plants to grow in. And then I think, Ian, if you look at the history of aerial photographs that have been provided by the applicant, this dune over the last 100 years has already built up and moved landward. Originally there was a bulkhead there with a beach in front of it. The sand actually overtopped that bulkhead and built up and started growing beach grass. So there is evidence in the aerial photographic record that the dune actually already has migrated, and there would be no justification as to why we think they wouldn't keep doing so. The amount of time that it will take to do is certainly up for debate. But at some points, if the suitable conditions are there and there's area for that dune to continue to migrate landward, there's no reason to think that it wouldn't.
Thank you, Seth. I take your point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, yeah. Any other thoughts on the dunes? Jeff?
So just to ask the question, so kind of what we're tasked with, though, is that impact being understood. Is there a way to, condition the project to monitor and mitigate that to happen? So that's the question before you, is now that the impact is established, is there a way to see that coming and be responsive to it? Is there a way to mitigate that impact? I only ask because if it suffers appeals, those are the questions that are going to get asked.
Yeah, I mean, if the dune is trying to migrate landward, if we see that start to happen, you can't say, all right, now you need to remove the house. I feel like that's kind of the next step. And once a structure's there, I don't know. That's a tough one for me, but I don't necessarily think you could mitigate for structures that are that close. Yes, they're out of the 25, but they're not like far out of the 25. Like they're really close to these resource areas. So I don't know that you can mitigate for that, in my opinion. But I don't know if other commissioners feel that you could in some way. Seth?
Yeah, I mean, assisted dune migration definitely is a field that exists. So there are ways to try to get ahead of that migration by adding sand potentially on the lateral edges of that house to kind of push the dune in the direction to migrate around the houses. But then you get into the discussion of, okay, now we don't have structure in the buffer zone. Now we have structure in a dune field. So I think by potentially attempting to mitigate for the impact, you're in a way making it worse. I think that there's a way to allow the dune to move somewhere, but it's not going to be able to move to a location that will offset the negative adverse impacts of the structure being there.
Thank you, Seth. Any other thoughts from commissioners on that one? All right, so I think Jeff, I guess, are we in agreement that this would be very difficult to mitigate for? I know Seth and I think so. Seth?
Yeah, that's definitely my opinion. And, you know, I hate to be the one to say this, but I think we also, before we get hung up on this specific condition only, need to go through the rest of the things that Jeff identified as well and see if any of those provisions need discussion.
Sure. So just to kind of move on to coastal banks, I feel pretty comfortable in saying this part. I think we can determine that the coastal bank is not a sediment source itself, as it's a bulkhead. So we're just going to the part where the coastal bank is determined to be significant to storm damage prevention or flood control because it is a vertical buffer to stormwaters. So the provisions in there that are applicable is any project on such a coastal bank or within 100 feet landward of the top of such coastal bank shall have no adverse effects on the stability of the coastal bank. And then bulkheads, revetments, seawalls, groins, or other coastal engineering structures may be permitted on such a coastal bank, except when such a bank is significant to storm damage prevention or flood control because it supplies sediment to coastal beaches, coastal dunes, and barrier beaches. So I don't think that's really applicable in this case. And then it's may have no impact to specified habitat sites of rare habitat or invertebrate species. So I'm not really sure that that's applicable. So that's really the only standard that applies under coastal bank, is that it can't destabilize the coastal bank.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't see that as being applicable to this project, or I don't see that the project impacts the little bulkhead that they have there.
What about coastal beach?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just jumping through the bylaw as quickly as I can. The state likes a lot of blank spots and pages. All right, so the determinations for coastal beach is when a coastal beach is determined to be significant to storm damage prevention, flood control, or protection of wildlife habitat. There's any project on a coastal beach except any project permitted under 310 CMR 1030A3A shall not have an adverse effect by increasing erosion, decreasing the volume, or changing the form of any such coastal beach or an adjacent or downdrift coastal beach. Then there's a question about the next standard involves groins, jetties, or solid piers, which doesn't apply. And then the last one is any beach nourishment with clean sediment size of a grain size compatible with that on the existing beach may be permitted. And those are the standards for coastal beach.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. I don't know that I see this impacting the beach. I really see it as more of a dune issue, but what do other commissioners feel? So does no statements mean it doesn't impact the beach? Okay. So it sounds like we're in agreement there that it doesn't have impacts to the beach.
Well, I don't, Madam Chair, I don't wish to be facetious, but I suppose under Chapter 91, theoretically, you could have some impact on the beach. Or is that a red herring? Or
no, I'm not sure what you.
I don't.
Sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
I don't think the standards of Chapter 91 are applicable in this because I think they would be applied through the Watersway review of Chapter 91.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Jeff, do we need to go through land subject to coastal storm flowage as well for this one?
1 second. Get it up. And they typically don't have any. They typically don't have any performance standards for land subject to coastal storm flowage under the State Act. So I don't necessarily think that that would be overly. I don't think that review is necessary.
Okay. Seth?
Yeah, given the review that we just made of the specific resource areas, it sounds like the impacts outlined are really for coastal dune. So I was wondering if Jeff would be willing to just run through those one more time to make sure we didn't miss anything in that section.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
On my way. So again, the standard basically for the flood zone for the state is that you can't alter the flood storage capacity of the lot. So that's so again, so the coastal dune here is you're finding that it's significant to storm damage prevention, flood control, or the protection of wildlife habitat. And if you make that finding that you're looking at any alteration or structure on a coastal dune or within 100 feet of a coastal dune shall not have an adverse effect on the coastal dune by affecting the ability of waves to remove sand from the dune, disturbing the vegetative cover so as to destabilize the dune, causing any modification of the dune form that would increase the potential for storm or flood damage, interfering with the landward or lateral movement of the dune, causing removal of sand from the dune artificially, or interfering with mapped or otherwise identified bird nesting habitat. That's really the one that's applicable.
Thank you, Jeff. Anybody else have thoughts to add there? Maureen?
Excuse me. I think it's a very good idea that we're picking it apart this carefully. And again, I wish this were clear in some way. I keep wanting someone to say, well, here's the answer. And we can all go, oh, yes, that's right. But going through the standard for the landward movement of the dune and the last thing you're saying, Jeff, I'm sorry, this is, I think, well, my brain is starting to get fried a little tiny bit. The very last piece of, do we have coastal storm flowage here as well in the State Act?
Yeah, there's the flooding. The performance standards related to those are not really existent other than the fact that you can't negatively impact the flood storage capacity of the lot. So that's why buildings are built in compliance with building code for flooding to not do that.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, so any other thoughts on the dune, or do we feel like we discussed it enough? I know Seth and I put in our 2 cents about it, but I agree. I think this is the resource area that's likely to have the adverse impacts. Seth?
Yeah, I mean, listening to the other impacts that Jeff mentioned, I really think the only one that's applicable is the landward and lateral migration. And in my opinion, there's no way to condition the project to deal with that. But if other commissioners think there is, then that would be the only sticking point that we couldn't issue a positive order for this.
Thank you, Seth. Maureen? Oh, you're muted.
Yes. I think the fact, I guess what I'm finally coming to a realization of is that I don't think what Seth just said was very helpful in terms of crystallizing what it is that one could look to in the future to see happening. And is there a way to somehow condition this so that movement will not be impacted. And I do, looking at that very specifically, I would say there is no way to condition that. And that makes sense to me in terms of the landward movement of the dune. So, so I'm coming out differently now than I did before.
Right. Thank you, Maureen. Yeah, and I'm obviously in agreement as well. I just don't think there's any way to mitigate for the dune moving backward with the two structures there. There's just nowhere for it to realistically go and keep a functioning dune system. So, Jeff?
I know I'm beating a dead horse, but I feel like I have to do it just because it's my job. Is even if you try to condition, sorry, I'm admitting Mark's iPad. So even a condition, something that read, again, having to exhaust this because I feel like we're probably going to get challenged regardless of how this goes. Even a condition that reads something like, you know, should the coastal dune migrate to within 25 feet of the existing structure, a new notice of intent shall be filed to allow for the dune migration or mitigate for any impacts associated with the dune migrating in and around the structures is not sufficient. Sorry, I'm just spitballing ideas because that's the, to me, it sounds like the argument is hinging on the lateral movement of the dune. And I'm just trying to make sure that if we're going to write this into a decision that we are 100% attempted to condition it, thought about it, and realized that it's not possible to do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, Seth just described that there is a field that kind of assists dunes with movement. I just don't see realistically with two structures physically on the ground that you could do anything besides removing the structures to allow that dune to move when it started to move. Like, I feel like that allows for the resource area to be damaged while people are trying to figure it out when there shouldn't be a structure there anyway, you know, when it's not permittable within the 50. Like, if I look at this and again, focus on that, the new eastern half, if that half was wide open, well then, yeah, the dune could migrate back that way really easily. But with both halves of that property developed, I don't see the potential to mitigate once the dune starts to move. But I mean, maybe other commissioners see a different way to mitigate for that. Doesn't seem like it though. Seth?
Yeah, I'll talk again, I guess. I think I really like where Jeff, you're coming from, but I think that unless the notice of intent submitted was for removal or a move of the structures farther back, that's the only way to allow that migration. So we could put the condition saying that if the dune moves to a certain distance away from the structures, we need a notice of intent to deal with it. But I feel like when that notice of intent comes, the question of how to deal with it is the only alternatives getting rid of the structure. So we're sort of in this circular loop here.
Yeah, and I just feel like we expressed these concerns to the applicant numerous times about moving some of the structure out of the 50, and they really didn't want to do it. So we did try to make these concerns known and allow them time to shift their project a little bit. But they were pretty clear that they were unwilling to shift those structures back at all. So with that sort of application.
Well, Madam Chair,
I don't know that we can do anything. Yes, Ian?
I asked Mr. Bailey specifically, and he said no.
Right. So
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what Ian just said. I'm sorry.
Ian, will you
I
repeat?
asked, yes, Madam Chair. I asked Dan Bailey specifically whether his client would countenance moving the new construction out of the 50, and he said no.
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you.
Jeff, do you think that's enough discussion, or do we need more robust discussion around that issue?
I think you guys have discussed it and have reasoning behind your decision. I mean, if you guys feel comfortable with it, I mean, I'll have to do some language here quickly, but I think we can put it together.
Okay. Seth?
Yeah, sorry to keep belaboring this point, but I'm just looking back at the final plan that is on record and to see, you know, how much of the lateral length of the property the two structures as proposed take up. And it's pretty much from almost the full way on the west to almost the full way on the east, with just a very small portion in the middle dividing the two structures. So there's nowhere for that sand to go except maybe in a tiny narrow tunnel up the middle, and it could go under the structures, as we said, but there's not going to be any suitable location with open light except for that tiny area in the middle of the two structures. So if there was a different configuration of the structures on site, it might be a different story, but the way it's drawn, I just don't see it.
Yeah. I agree with you there, Seth. Maureen? Oh, you're muted.
I muted it instead. Okay.
Oh, now you're good.
Yeah. Because I voted for it in since I voted aye in the earlier vote, I just want to be very clear for the record that because of the additional information and the discussion of my fellow commissioners about the fact that the landward movement of the dune will be impacted by the fact of these two structures, and that is, and that there is no adequate way to condition adding this second structure unless the applicant were willing to move it move it farther back from the resource area. And the applicant was very clear that they would not be willing to do that. I feel it is necessary to vote that this should be denied under the state provisions as well as the Nantucket bylaw.
Thank you, Maureen. So Jeff, are we ready to make a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I mean, I need to put pen to paper a little bit here pretty quickly if you guys want to see a draft order for that, or as much as it kills me to say it, if you want me to write it, we'll have to have some sort of special meeting just to hear the negative order within the full 21 days. So we closed it on the 1st, so we'd have to have it before next Thursday. Or I can try to write it now, and share my screen, but I'm gonna need a few minutes to do that.
Yeah, and it's 8 o'clock, so I don't know. I mean, Jeff, do you think if we? Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't think if we end up having a special, I don't think that it would take very long to do. to just go over it, and it would give me a chance to write it, and then not try to do it on a whim here.
Yeah. I think that would probably be better just because of how late it is and we don't want to make any mistakes in drafting this one.
Yes.
Maureen, did you have something to say or add?
I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. So Jeff, should we discuss a special meeting now before we move on in the draft?
I think if that's what we're looking to do, is Joanne and I tomorrow will look to schedule a time somewhere on Wednesday or Thursday of next week. Probably, I don't know, does 4 o'clock-ish usually work for everybody, give or take?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put it out there right now. I'm gonna be on vacation, so I can't attend that special meeting, but I'm sure the commission are fine without me.
Yes, but Madam Chair, Seth, couldn't
Yeah.
you call in? I mean, I'm in darkest Maine and I'm calling in, thankfully with cell phone reception.
I can call in potentially depending on the timing of and my schedule. I'll keep it in mind.
Right. Thank you.
I do think this one, the more commissioners we can have sitting to make the final vote, the better.
Well, why don't we'll pull together a couple times and we'll send it around tomorrow and we'll see what everyone can do.
Okay. All right. So this one will continue to a special meeting next.
Yeah, but we're running out of time. Sorry, Ashley, go ahead.
I just said this will continue to a special time next week, or a special meeting next week. Excuse me. So I guess that'll move us on in the draft orders. And that brings us to 36 Shakamo Road, Shakamo 1 LLC.
All right, sorry about that, guys. Again, it's getting my screen clear of the 100 things that I had open to get back to this one. So this was for the small construction of an addition on an existing structure that we had looked at last time. There were no waivers required. We had been waiting for Heritage to close this one out, which we did this evening. So I couldn't really think of any conditions. It seemed pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Any thoughts from commissioners on this one, or is there a motion to approve as drafted? Dave, are you making a motion?
I am so moved.
All right. Is there a second?
Yes.
Seconded by Ian. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And that moves us to Tina Eager McGoldrick Trust at 33 Quidnet Road. So Jeff, this is the one that had the little retaining wall, right? That was added by Heritage. Or not by Heritage, but Heritage changed the driveway and then they added the retaining wall.
Yes, I am. Sorry, I'm just bringing it up.
I feel your pain of the multiple windows open when I'm taking attendance and have like Google Meets up and the screen I'm sharing with my students. It's a nightmare.
Oh, and we're also kind of actively trying to schedule our special meeting while this is going on too. So I apologize for some of the side conversations, but we're trying to work on figuring out how to actually accomplish this. So, all right, so this was the driveway. Did anyone have any other conditions for that? With the little retaining walls and all that fun stuff? Again, it seemed pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I'm glad Heritage moved the driveway a little and had them call out some of those larger trees. So I don't have anything to add. If nobody else has anything to add, is there a motion to approve as drafted?
So moved.
Is there a second? Seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously.
And just to identify that I am for Terry, that I was the one that proposed it, Ian Golding.
Yes, so Ian made the motion. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
So that moves us on to 64 Pacomo Road Realty Trust at 64 Pacomo Road. And this one had the pool with retaining walls, and they had a coastal bank and a low bordering vegetated wetland down below the pool.
Yes. So I had our standard pool conditions on this and didn't really have anything else at the moment, but I think I'm going to recommend a 23. This will be a new pool condition. The applicant shall provide contact information for the company maintaining the pool. Period. The pool company shall provide 48-hour notice of any draining to the commission with a plan showing where the pool shall be drained to.
Thank you, Jeff.
That makes sense to everybody?
Absolutely.
Yes. Is there anything else to add, or is there a motion to approve as amended?
Also moved.
So I'll give Mark the motion and Ian the second, if that's
Can we
okay.
just look at the town calendar on the town website and see if there's anything.
By roll vote, Beal,
It's just on the main town page.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us on to Abramson at 80 Millbrook Road. This is the one with the pool and the second dwelling and all of the pitch pine.
So, Madam Chair, may I suggest that if we're having a special meeting, that that would give Jeff a chance to draft that as well?
This order was in the draft packet. Have you?
Right. So we have the additions of, 3 times the number of pine trees. Well, whatever. I was just a suggestion on my part.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Jeff thinks it only needs simple amendments or if we need another go.
I think if we buckle down, we can give it a try real quickly and see where we get. So I already added the same condition we talked about on the last one as number 26 for the contact information on the pool company and any draining information 48 hours in advance. I was going to say 27, the applicant shall provide the number and basal area of pitch pines removed. from within the commission's jurisdiction, and that area shall be replaced by, do we want to replace it by 3 times?
That was the proposal. That was agreed upon by Mark Ritz. It was Seth's suggestion, right?
Yeah.
Very good one, I might add.
So the applicant shall provide the number and basal area. Actually, I'm going to put a prior to the start of work.
Is there a DBH? Is there a DBH requirement, Jeff?
So when you calculate basal area, Mark, to calculate basal area, you square the DBH and then multiply it by, see if my good forestry school remembers this correctly, you square the DBH and multiply it by 005454 to get your basal area in linear feet.
I missed that in forestry school.
So, well, I'm amazed that that's one of those numbers that got beat into my head. I feel like I had like a hot button on my calculator.
Well, I used to be a certified tree farmer too, but not anymore.
No, I took my field botany class pretty recently, and I didn't know that number off the top of my head, so that's good.
You can also use a nifty internet tool these days to just plug the DBH and have the web do it for you. But getting back to the conditions, I think there's potentially 2 things that are maybe getting lumped together. So my ask was for the basal area of the trees to be cut to be delivered, and then also of the trees planted to be sent to us. In terms of the mitigation plantings, I think what was proposed by the applicant was 3-to-1 in terms of the number of trees, not in terms of the number of, or not in terms of the amount of basal area. But I guess we could get at it either way. Just want to make sure we're clear in what we're saying.
All right, so I'll maybe rephrase that based upon that a little bit, Seth. So I'd say prior to the start of work, the applicant shall provide the number of trees and basal area of pitch pines removed from within the commission's jurisdiction. End of that condition. And then I'll put the area of pitch pines planted shall be planted in 3 times the number of trees removed. Upon planting, a basal area of these trees shall be provided to the commission on an annual basis for 3 years.
Madam Chair, may I make observation, please?
Yes, Ian?
So, Jeff, theoretically, since we've been talking about planting them outside our jurisdiction, couldn't they argue if they chose that since it was outside of our jurisdiction that they didn't have to honor that agreement?
So it's a little bit sticky, but I think because they included it in their proposal, they would be obligated to still maintain that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's something I kind of asked about earlier too, because I am concerned about that. Is there any way we can write like a condition to that effect, that the planting is serving as mitigation and should remain in perpetuity?
So I think you would do that under additional findings. So.
Okay.
It's like I'm just going to write it and then I'll read it.
So, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Ian?
So there was construction protocols to be considered with advanced meetings, and also to address Mark Beal's concerns earlier of how to address the construction of the pool in such a way that it doesn't impinge on the 50-foot setback.
And second dwelling.
Right. Thank you, Mark.
I would just say all construction access is limited to the north side of the house.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would agree that any construction to get it more to what we can care about, any vehicular traffic, and also I believe Mark agreed to this, that they would bring everything there where the old pool is coming through, so that
Right.
So any vehicles or any construction equipment that is being used for the building of the pool must access the property via, from the north, or however one does that.
And second dwelling.
Does that sound okay? What did
And
you?
second dwelling.
Oh, and
And
the
second dwelling,
oh,
Maureen.
yeah, both, right.
Yeah, I am still a little bit worried about us not really having control over some of that access ultimately. I mean, Jeff, can we condition it since it's outside of our jurisdiction, the access portion? No.
So just as a suggestion, so I have some conditions down. So to jump back for a second, I added an additional finding that reads: the area outside the commission's jurisdiction dedicated to pitch pine planting is to serve as mitigation for pitch pines lost within the commission's jurisdiction and shall be maintained in perpetuity, despite the fact that I spelled that wrong. But so that was a recommended there. And then to jump ahead to the construction, so the notes that I put down, I have all construction access for the pool and second dwelling shall be to the north of the existing structure. Prior to any work, the contractor shall meet on site with commission staff to go over all construction protocols and accesses. And then 31, the applicant shall install construction fencing along the 50-foot setback while the retaining walls are being installed.
Yeah, I'd just like to, that sounds very good to me. Oh, excuse me, Ashley. I just want to comment on Jeff's. That ties it together with the preservation of what is in our jurisdiction. So I think, since we are allowed to worry about, what might, because of the construction, what might happen that would, badly impact our jurisdiction. I think tying all those together, I think that makes sense. And I think it's within certainly the spirit of what we are allowed. And again, they also, he had no trouble agreeing to that. And I think, that's also important. So.
Thank you, Maureen. Seth?
Sorry, one more thing related to the pitch pine planting area. So we're going to get the annual basal area calculations for that area. I'm wondering if we're also able to get photo monitoring of those trees, and if we're able to put a similar survivability criteria into place there, or are we not able to, since it's outside of resource area jurisdiction?
I would think since it's mitigation, we should be able to set those same conditions. Jeff, do you think that's possible?
Sorry, could you repeat that question?
Sure. Can we put a photo monitoring condition and a survivability condition into place for the pitch pine planting area, even if it's outside of our jurisdictional resource area?
So if I may, Madam Chair, I would have thought if it's part of the condition of cutting them down within our jurisdiction, that the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think if you added it to that finding, that those shall be maintained at a 90% survivorship, I think you would. I think you could do that.
And Jeff, I have kind of a follow-up about this property. So there was great discussion on the, having less than 50% of the area between the 25 and 50 altered. And I think they basically, with this project, maxed out on the alterations they could make to that portion of the buffer zone. Is that something that should be called out in these orders that say, at this point, they've reached the maximum that they can alter this area, so future permitting, doesn't allow for any other alterations or structures or something along those lines? Or is that like way out of the ballpark?
Give me a second to look at something with that really quickly. So if people have other comments, that would be really awesome. But I can get you an answer for that in 2 seconds.
Okay.
Maybe a little longer.
Sorry to jump back and forth too, but can we also get an answer as to whether we're allowed to get photo monitoring of the pine planting area?
Yeah, so if they have to provide the basal area, we can have them include photographs too.
If I would like that, please.
Yeah. I think the photo monitoring is important for us to have that documentation. Any other thoughts on this order while Jeff is looking up my last question?
Well, I think your last question is a really salient point. So I hope it can be put down in print.
Right, and then it's something like all of our orders should almost have, once that area has been altered to 50%, that's it.
Right. I'm really uncomfortable with this. I know that Mark Ritz called me out and stuff, but I feel that it's really altering what is, unaltered habitat in a way that is unfortunate. I wish they had chosen to put the structure elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree, Ian. It's tough sometimes when there are probably other alternatives that would protect the ecology of these sites a little more, and applicants are allowed to build as close as they are, and even if it's kind of presented to them that there might be alternatives, they don't necessarily want to take them, and that is very difficult.
Maybe we could strengthen our language, our regulatory language going forward, that if there is an alternative, then it will be, and to give it some additional regulatory enforcement or structure.
Yeah, I think I know Jeff has so much on his plate right now, but I'm going to be back in his ear about the regulatory updates on top of all the other things that are on our plates, so we can get it done. Yes, Jeff?
Yes, I 100% agree with that statement, Ashley, and I understand that. But to answer your question about the 50% is, I need another computer screen. I think we could do an additional finding number 3, because they referenced on their plan, it says existing native vegetation area between the 25 and 50 buffer zones to remain is 50.3%. So I think if we just say the commission finds that the existing native vegetation area between 25 and 50 foot buffer zones to remain is 50.3% as shown on the plan of record. Period. Continuing, any future alteration this area will require waivers to be granted. Actually, I don't want to say waivers to be granted. Will require a waiver request to be presented to the commission for review. All right, so that finding is the commission finds that the existing native vegetation area between the 25 and 50-foot buffer zones to remain is 50.3% as shown on the plan of record. Any future alteration of this area will require a waiver request to be presented to the commission for review.
I think that's good. Seth?
Yeah, I think it's good as well. Just wanted to make sure we're being extremely clear. So they could come in with a redevelopment proposal. Like, let's say they have a pool and they would like to remove the pool and put a porch there. They could do that, but they can't do something to alter the native vegetation that continues to exist in that area.
Correct.
Yes. Any other thoughts from commissioners on this one? This is the night of the orders, I feel like.
I know we made it so quickly through the notices and we've just, hit the wall here.
Ugh. All right, so if there's no other additions to this one, is there a motion to approve as amended? Motion made by Seth, seconded by Dave. So by roll vote, Beal,
Yes.
okay, so
I
that's
hate it.
a reluctant yes.
Yeah.
Engelborg,
Aye.
I'm gonna say no on this one. I think Heritage dropped the ball, and they have alternatives, so I'm a no. Golding,
Yeah, I'm a no too. Thank you.
LaFleur,
I'm an aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Okay, so that carries with myself and Commissioner Golding opposed.
And Madam Chair, I need to sign off now. So thank you for your indulgence and my warm regards to all my fellow commissioners and staff. So
30 seconds, Ian. It
Yes.
looks like we have found a time for a special meeting next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Does that work for everybody?
yes,
Wait.
Yes.
I'll make a point of making sure it does. So thank you.
Let
Yeah,
me
I
just-
can make it work.
You said 5 o'clock?
Yeah, on Tuesday.
uh,
We'll double check in the morning, but that's the time we're pushing for because I think we can get Seth there and everyone else there too. So that's what we're going to push for.
You said 5 o'clock on Tuesday? Yes, I can do that.
Yes.
I can.
So, Ashley, if you could, why don't you just announce that we'll have that special meeting for the orders of conditions for 5 p.m. on Tuesday, and then I'll feel better that we're going to a date certain there.
Okay,
Joe,
so
Joe available?
We'll find out. I'm
Yeah.
going to say yes for Joe right now.
I
so
didn't know if you contacted him on the side or something.
so we are going to.
He is out of communication at the moment, so but we'll.
All right,
We'll
so
make
I'm
sure.
gonna make this announcement. So we're gonna continue Kim Glowacki and 46 Easton Street and our look at their order to a special meeting, and that special meeting will be Tuesday, October 20th at 5 p.m.
Yes.
All right. So that's done.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Good
Thanks,
night.
Ian.
Bye, Ian. Have a good night.
Bye, Ian. Enjoy Maine.
Thank you.
Um,
I am. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. So that moves us on to Jean-Francois Formella at 8 Old Westmore Farm Road. This was
So this was,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah,
Jeff.
this was the construction of the garage and removal of the gazebo. And when I looked at the plan, to be perfectly honest, I think just I wasn't sure if a bulkhead from the new house was clipping the 100. I don't know if it was just a drafting thing. So I kind of called out the two structures and then some driveway work. And then I just had the finding that the pool was outside of commission jurisdiction because the building department likes to know that we at least acknowledge that it exists. So other than that, I didn't really have any conditions.
Are there any questions from commissioners, or is there a motion to approve the order?
So moved.
A motion made by Dave. Is there a second? Seconded by Mark. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrison, I, LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And we've made it through the draft orders. Right? Okay, so that moves us on to extension requests. We have Locke at 34B Grove Lane, and this is represented by Paul Santos, who stuck it out through all those orders. Thank you, Paul.
I've lasted through this whole meeting. Thank you very much. This is an extension request for Susan Lister Locke for a property at 34B Grove Lane. We have the ability to have one more extension under this order. This is the last extension that we can have. It survived the Permit Extension Act and 2 one-year extensions that this commission has granted. We're just looking, based on the events of the last year here, we're looking to get this last year of the order extended and hopefully make some decisions with Susie on how she's going to move forward, or whether she's going to move forward with this project. This was an addition to an existing dwelling over on Grove Lane. So,
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions from commissioners?
I'll move for approval.
Okay, so move to issue the one-year extension. Is seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, LaFleur, Phillips.
Aye.
All right, so that carries unanimously. Thank you, Paul.
thank you and good luck on Tuesday.
Thanks.
Good night, Paul.
So that moves us on to other business, approval of minutes from October 1st. They were emailed out separately. So did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes? And if
Yes.
there's no comments on the minutes, is there a motion to approve as drafted?
Approve.
So motion made by Dave. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, LaFleur.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Great. The minutes are approved. Thank you, Terry, as always, for being the most amazing minutes taker on island, for sure. That moves us on to reports. Our crack member just jumped off. CPC is not here, so we have NP and EDC.
Okay. NPEDC doesn't meet until Monday, but I did attend the crack meeting because it was a meeting about Nantucket. So Ian had emailed me and asked me just to be the Concom person there. And so the various projects that we have going in Nantucket were discussed for erosion control, and it was a very good discussion. So that's that.
Thank you, Maureen. So that moves us on to commissioners' comments. Do we have any commissioners' comments? I just have some random enforcement questions, I guess, that Jeff might answer coming up.
I am on me.
But I'm wondering about that Hollywood Farm property again, and what's going on with that one.
So we didn't get a response from our enforcement order, so we drafted up a letter that we're having council look at, and we're going to have it probably served by the sheriff to him, and then start daily fines until he responds. I just wanted to make sure that our language was straight, as you guys are kind of authorized for this to trying to get that out.
Okay. Thank you for that update. If there's no other commissioners' comments, we'll move it to administrator staff reports.
Yeah, I'll try to go really fast, and I think to kind of speed it up is Joanne and I have a number of enforcement issues that we have some next steps to take or to get issued out. Some of them we've already issued out on our own. So maybe we'll prepare like a little mini packet for the special meeting on Tuesday, just for people. But there are some of them that we'd like to deal with. We did have an incident that I know Ashley's aware of out at 41 Millbrook Road, where a pool was improperly drained into a resource area. We have issued out, I issued out a ticket to the homeowner who's responsible for that. I delivered a actual copy of the permit to the pool company by hand, in person, on site. Told them that they were no longer allowed to discharge that pool and to stop. And then as a follow-up to that, we had the health department, who also has interest in where that discharge goes, show up about 45 minutes to an hour after we were there and found that they were not discharging their pool again, but they were not properly wearing their masks. So they left with a $900 ticket from the health department for that. So not a good day for those folks. But that's something that, again, that's there. And to kind of update everybody, we told Ashley is our office and health, Roberto and I had drafted a set of illicit discharge regulations for the town to adopt in 2018. And for a lot of different reasons that I don't want to get to at 8:30 at night, they stalled out outside of our hands, and we've been trying to push for those to be adopted for about 3 years now. And it's kind of reinvigorated. So hopefully we have a meeting about it on Monday. Hopefully it'll be in front of either the select board or the Board of Health in pretty short order. It's all been reviewed by council. So I think we feel pretty good about it, and will give us some real teeth to not only deal with pools, but also dewatering, sump pumps, all kinds of different pieces to hopefully address some of our illicit discharge issues more effectively and with some actual penalties, other than a firm scolding from someone with a town seal on their shirt. So, but we did get that addressed. I know that was a concern. We will issue that property owner an enforcement action on behalf of the commission as well. We'll get you guys to ratify that next week to summon them in front of the commission, so they have to face the music and potentially take further steps to deal with that in the future, which I think is totally fair. But like I said, we've already issued them a ticket. So feel free to pile on. I think it would send a good message to everybody. And other than that, I'll save the rest of them for next week.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Dave. Is there a second?
Okay.
Seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, aye, LaFleur,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
All right. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Ashley. Everyone have a great night. Maureen, I love your sweater.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Good night.